Thank you, Modesto. Good morning, everyone, for our callbacks for our hearing today. I understand that the state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We're using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings and council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. McDermott, will you please call the roll to take attendance for the hearing?
Councilmember Bass.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, colleagues, and the City of Philadelphia. I am present.
Councilmember Brooks.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues, and Philadelphia. I'm present.
Councilmember Dom.
Morning, Chairman Squilla and colleagues and the City of Philadelphia.
Councilmember Gautier. Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. Councilmember Green.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, colleagues. I'm looking forward for another great hearing.
Councilmember Gim. Councilmember Keenan.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Bob, and good morning, colleagues.
Morning. Councilmember Johnson.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, colleagues.
Councilmember Jones.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members. Good morning, Philadelphia.
Councilmember O'Neill. Councilmember O. Councilmember Parker.
Good morning, Chairman Squilla and colleagues.
Councilmember Quinones Sanchez. Councilmember Thomas.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, colleagues.
Okay, and that is all, Councilman Squilla.
Thank you.
Member Squilla, I don't know, did you record me as being present?
Yes, you are recorded as present. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. McDermott. The quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is a public hearing of the committee for the whole regarding bills number 210320, 210321, 210322, 210323, 210324, and resolution number 210336. Mr. McDermott, please read the titles of the bills and resolutions.
Bill number 210320, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2022 to 2027 inclusive. Bill number 210321, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal year 2022 capital budget. Bill number 210322, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2022. Bill number 210323, an ordinance amending chapter 192600 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Business Income and Receipts Taxes by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 210324, an ordinance amending chapter 191500 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Wage and Net Profits Taxes by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. And resolution number 210336, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia, a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2022 through 2026, and incorporating proposed changes with respects to fiscal year 2022, which is to be submitted by the mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement authorized by an ordinance of this council, approved by the mayor on January 3rd, 1992, by and between the city and the authority. You're muted, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Today we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to be considered the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for the fiscal year 2022, capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal year 2022 through the fiscal year 2027. Before we begin the hearing, testimony and witnesses and questions today, Everyone who has been invited to this meeting to testify should be aware that the public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing of the public participants or viewers have no reason to be except privacy. By continuing to be in this meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing the member for the questions or comments they have for the witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that they will use the chat feature available on Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized in order to comply with the Sunshine Act. The chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Today, we are conducting a callback session. Joining us will be Public Property, Licenses Inspections, Department of Prisons, and the Registers of Wills. At 3 p.m., we will be conducting a public testimony. All right, as we go through here, what we'll do is we'll have council members who are looking to ask questions to the departments that are present. We'll start off with Public Property. Not sure, Councilmember Heenan, I see that you have a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question is for Public Property. If Commissioner Greenwald is online, I'd like to have her attention for just a few.
I'm here. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for everything that you do. There's a couple quick questions, but let me get my questions I've been asking every department. And I think it falls a little bit more on you, and it should have been circulated to every department in the city of Philadelphia about regarding public property or spaces, what we lease, what we own. So I'm going to run by them to you. You do not have to answer them. You can get it back in writing. But again, I just want to put it on the record as I have been doing for the past 10 years. And I think it comes more into play on how we are and, what is our design for workspaces and how efficient we are when it comes to our workplace, with our workplaces, especially going through a pandemic and us, slowly going to reopen, which will be one of my follow-up questions. So, what buildings do we have? How many floors do we have? And what departments work in what building? Do we own or do we lease? And what's the value of those lease and what is the value of our real properties? Approximately how many square feet is utilized for these spaces? How much of that square footage is for storage versus workspace for employees? What is the purpose of the storage? Is it documents? And is it records? Is it supplies? Is it equipment? When was the last time we made physical improvements that was made to any of our offices and workspaces? I know we were working with the planning department for from new design, and it's actually in your testimony, design and deliver modernized and efficient workspaces for city employees. So a status of that with the goal of improving worker productivity, morale, and health. What percentage of number of our employees are primarily working in-house, in an office space versus how many employees are in the field in our departments? Do these employees have touchdown space? So in our buildings of public property that we own, that we lease, and whatever that value is, and whatever limited space we have, or how much is available, do we have touchdown shared space for them, for those to come in to do reports, such as like workstations, and in what locations are they? What percentage of numbers of employees that in public property specific and other departments are working from home full time, especially during the pandemic, and who is part-time in hybrid, coming in or just working from home? How many part-time workers do we have, and where are they working? what portion of the city's employees are unable to work from home just because of the nature of their job, meaning essential workers, and do they have a office space proper to work in, and what does that look like? And do all city employees currently have the resources necessary to work at home? May not be within your purview, but these are the questions that I'm asking generally. And if not, what additional investments that it'll be need to make for either working permanently at home or working safely in touchdown spaces or redesigned spaces for the mental health and physical health of our employees to increase efficiency and effective work conditions. So they're my general questions that I ask everybody in every department that has come up, and I know it's been circulated, so we will recirculate that to you, and if you could get back to me and or council president will certainly have the answers to some of these questions. Three quick questions. What is our reopening plan for public property in our city spaces, and is it going to be a phase-in, and when does it take place, and what percentage of our workforce is a part of that phase-in plan till we get to full capacity?
Okay. So for the first statement that you made, yes, we gathered all that information and submitted it to the budget office. So I assume we'll submit it to council president, and then it'll get to you. So we've filled that out for public property, and we've helped some of the other departments, fill that information out as well. As for the return to work, we have issued a return to work pamphlet. It's a document. So it's gone to all of our employee liaisons in the Quadplex. So CJC, the MSB, the One Parkway building, and City Hall, which had the most employees that were working remotely. It actually will be updated due to the new health guidelines that have now said there will be no more social distancing. So information in that booklet has protocols for elevators. It has protocols for cleaning, enhanced cleaning. That'll stick around. It has protocols for the filters and the HVAC systems and what were done. PPE, so the hand sanitizers, mask requirements. So all those, all that information has been included in those brochures. I don't have a good word for them. Handbooks, maybe. So all that information is included in them. Like I said, we're updating them now due to the new health requirements, not requiring distancing, but you will receive a revised copy. It should be any day now, because all we have to do is take out a couple lines, but I have to have health just to prove it before I send it right back out.
Okay, is there a timeline? Are we going with the June 11th order? So post June 12th, everybody get their stuff ready to go, move in, or we returned it back to school in September? So
that process is not being run out of the Department of Public Property. It's being run out of the CAO's office. So the CAO is meeting with each individual department, and each individual department is going to submit its action plan on how it returns to work. So each could be different, right? So for my department, for example, I can speak for public property. Most public property employees have been in, right? Because part of public property's purview is to be maintaining the buildings. So a lot of people have been in. We have a smaller staff that has worked in a hybrid system from home. So I can speak for public properties department, but the CAO is going to be issuing a more comprehensive report on how everybody's coming in, how the public will be coming back in. But the last date I was told the reopening for the public and employees was July 6th.
Okay, and I hope that that council president's office has been involved at some point with these conversations, because it affects everybody at City Hall and our council body and staffing. So I get somebody's going to make a decision at some point, right? So everybody's getting the information together, and it's given to a person or a team or a committee, and they're going to make a decision. I just want to make sure that council has representation in that.
Yeah, we work hand in hand with Mary Ellen. I see Mary Ellen all the time. So that's who we're working with on council on your return to work plans. And she's done a lot already. If you've been in City Hall, you know what I mean, you can see some of the protocols she's already put in place. So we're working hand in hand with her.
That's good, because this reopen and at least phase in plan or coordination really kind of dovetails back into my opening statement on who we are as public property and who we are as a city workforce and how we operate. So thank you for that, and I hope that really we could take some of those questions and incorporate it into our reopening plans. But that's what I have right now here for round one. So thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Council Member. First, for the record, I'd like to recognize that Council Member Gilmore Richardson is also present. We'll continue on with the questions. We have Council Member Parker, then Council Member Johnson, then Council Member Jones. So, Council Member Parker.
Thank you, Chairman Squilla. And Chairman, I just wanted to make sure that now these are only questions for public property, or is it L&I public property and register of wills?
You know what, Council Member, everybody is available. So if you want to either one of those, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start with public property. Bridget, I wanted to get a chance to say to you on the record, thank you so very much for all of the support that we have received from your office. I know there were multiple locations where we had to work with public property to ensure that we could stand up different programs operating throughout the 9th Councilmatic District. And every time we've called on you, your office has always been supportive, and we wanted to say thank you for the record for all of your work. With that being said, my question to you is about regular and requested maintenance and additional fencing for lots that are owned by the Department of Public Property. And so I guess let me give an example, like vacant properties that are available for purchase by the public. But right now, obviously, they are vacant. So, they become sort of dumping sites. So is there, like a process or protocol, or when do we determine if we're going to fence certain lots in?
Sure. So like the rest of the city, we utilize CLIP, who, as we all know, is a wonderful program. So if someone, we all know, right? So we get Tommy and his crew, and they go out and they will clean a vacant lot if there's short dumping on it, if we get a complaint, service request from a neighbor or whatnot. We monitor the lot to see if it determines a fence. With the limited funding, for the vacant programs, because most of our money goes into owner-occupied facilities, we make that determination on, okay, we've been here X amount of times, we have to put a fence up. So that's what we try to do. We try to discourage it, and I know if you talk to CLIP, the thing is, the more you go out and deter people, you know what I mean, the more they won't do it. So that's what we try to do first. We will put a fence up if we determine that this is a place that they're just going to be short dumping and we have to stop it.
Well, listen, I also want to get on the record right now that, we have not, always felt that we had a cooperative spirit with Conrail, right? Especially when a Conrail property is right next to a vacant city-owned property, and this is our side. And when we're saying, well, we need you to fence in your property, right? It will prohibit dumping on your side, and they have not just been willing partners at all. So we do have some work in motion trying to get a more cooperative spirit from Conrail, especially when their property abuts vacant city owned land. So we will be contacting your office so that we are sort of, locked arm in arm in our advocacy. So Conrail is not trying to pull one over, on the city of Philadelphia. In addition to that, Commissioner, I want to make sure that I shout out just a few names. And if they're listening and you know them, tell them, charge it to my head and not my heart for chopping up their names. Edwin Gabormita, who was the architect, Joseph Garbarino, who was the project manager, and Patrick Livingston, who was the real estate specialist. When we were working, Bridget, on 7800, when I tell you they were, and listen, it was morning, noon, and night when issues came up, but they were always very graceful and very professional. And I wanted to just make sure I got that on the record. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. And thank you. We had a meeting with everyone that you just mentioned on that call, on that shout out yesterday, and everything is up and running on Ogons and it looks good. And it's been a very successful project now. So we're happy with the way it turned out.
Thank you. And I think I left a Rich Mariano. So Rich, a shout out to Rich too. I don't want to leave him out. Mm-hmm. Now can I have our Register of Wills, Tracy Gordon. Register of Wills, are you with us?
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, City Council. Yes, I am.
Oh, good morning. I just wanted to, I do not have any questions for you. What I did want to say was to give you a huge shout out for the work that you, along with public property, have done as it relates to those tangled titles. It was innovative, and I would argue that this is a partnership and a model that I guarantee you other cities are going to be looking at and trying to find a way to duplicate what we have done here in the city of Philadelphia with your leadership and that of our Department of Records. I can't tell you about the barriers to access to ownership, particularly for Black and brown people who don't, and I was trying to communicate this to a friend who didn't seem to understand, what the person died and they didn't just transfer the property through their will. What about their estate? I said, let me tell you something. Grandma and grandpop struggled to just own the property. They may not have had an accountant or retainer like your family did, or have a lawyer on retainer, right? To put all of their assets into an estate and or to develop a will. So what you've done with public property is make an effort to level the playing field to ensure that people, and not just, and this is another thing I want to big up you on, this wasn't just, usually we start talking about folks living in 30% of the AMI, 50% of the AMI, but I'm telling you, you can be working and have a job making $60,000. Your husband's making $60,000, and you have 2 kids, and you still be house poor, just trying to maintain a certain quality of life, and still may have a tangled title. So just thank you for that. We're going to lift you and our Department of Records up, and of course, we're about to open up and get back in person. Although we've done our community meetings and town meetings via Zoom, my people have said, when are you bringing back your budget briefings and town hall meetings so we can talk to people in person instead of over the phone? I said, as soon as we open, we'll be ready. And Register of Wills, I will be calling on your office as usual to make sure that you are with us to talk about that program. You want to give us an update on how it's been going?
Yes, thank you so much. And I will definitely take this back to my staff, because this whole initiative has been a team effort from the beginnings of the planning stages when we had to come to your office and sell it to you all, this probate deferment initiative, which will assist families in getting ownership of those dead properties. We have a whole bunch, they're saying 17,000 now, a whole bunch of dead property that's sitting out there, and people cannot conduct any business legally with that. They don't own it. The dead person owns it. And the problem here in the state of Pennsylvania is our office was not getting the information out so people could understand there is legal terms and conditions around owning property and how you transfer it to your generational wealth. So that $60,000 a year the resident that you just talked about and that middle income, they could very well be living in a tangled title that's in their dear parents' name and not know that they don't own it.
Yeah,
they're sitting there without any homeowners insurance, which is a risk for all of us because we live in row homes. They can't take any loans out on it. They can't get the Homestead Act. And then all the programs that you all are fighting in your communities to bring out to them, to let them know that there are grants out there to help them fix their properties up, is not available to them. So it's putting a hardship not only on your direct communities and council districts, and soon there is going to be an audit that is being conducted by Pew Charitable Trust that's going to actually let us know in real time where these houses are so we can make direct communication with them. So I'd like to thank you all for all the accolades, but the accolades come from all of us as a team working together, my staff, making sure you all were educated so it could be easier for you all to get down to doing other business and let the Register of Wills help your constituents with those legal matters as it pertains to real estate and estate and generational wealth. So thank
Register of Wills Gordon, again, thank you, your team, along with the Department of Records. If I
yes,
say
Commissioner Leonard.
Listen, he has been, we were working with him on appraisals. We had his help when we were dealing with squatting. And I don't care what department it is that you run or work for here in the city. We only work well when we're talking to each other. You know, no decision making in isolation, right? But bringing everybody to the table at once. And to Philly VIP, along with Community Legal Services and the Senior Law, John Dodge.
Christian Legal Services.
Yes, the Unemployment Project. I mean, all of those agencies working with your office along with the Department of Records. It's been huge. So thank you again. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my line of questioning and comments.
And one more thing I wanted to add about the Honorable Commissioner Leonard. He told me in the middle of the pandemic, because you know we were open during the whole pandemic, that real estate has to move, and there was no way that our offices would have been able to shut down during a pandemic like this. These offices have to stay open because real estate is transferring. So he's done an amazing job over there with just giving people access, and the people that are poor that can't afford to pay for the transfer, he's waiving those fees. So this is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal teamwork that we're all doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Register of Wills, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. We will, next line of questioning was from Councilmember Johnson, Jones, and then Councilmember Dom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just had a question for Commissioner of Public Property, Ms. Bridget Greenwald.
Hello.
How you doing today?
I'm good.
I had a question regarding the use of the new policy regarding use of stages. And I know a lot of our community groups, a lot of elected officials, in city council, we host a lot of different events throughout the summer. And from my understanding, there's a new policy regarding if stages will be used or not.
So I can't speak if there's a new policy. I know that I can speak for public property and our involvement in special events right now. So the Department of Public Property had a huge part in special events. Historically, we would set up stages and barricades. That was our big thing. During the pandemic, when we had to take that budget cut, that is something that we had to cut out of our budget. So unfortunately, we actually had to lay off the staff that worked in the special events unit, and we had to relinquish any responsibility for the stage or the barricade setup. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to be turned over to another department or something like that going forward. I think MDO Special Events might be able to, to answer that question better than I. But unfortunately, we don't have the staff that can participate in those activities anymore.
Have you requested in your upcoming budget proposal, funding to reinstate staff to provide that function?
So we have not. We requested different things to replenish some of the maintenance cuts that we took for the facilities, but we have not requested the funding to replenish the special events class 100 money.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Next question I have, Mr. Chairman, is for Register of Wills. Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Register, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I'll see you
Good.
later on at that ribbon cutting. I'm so happy, and thank you for bringing that playground to Southwest Philly.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I want to also follow up with the sentiments of my colleague, Majority Leader Sherelle Parker, regarding your work around tangled titles and making sure that people in predominantly low-income areas recognize the wealth that they have. And something that you touched on is critically important is that a lot of the key initiatives that we offer as a tool to address gentrification, if the deed isn't in a person's actual name, they can't take advantage of it. And so that's like half the battle, because when we're addressing gentrification and we're offering programs such as Loop or Homestead Exemption or the tax deferment payment plan, you can't take advantage of it if you don't have the actual home deed inside your name. And so definitely want to acknowledge you and thank you and your team for that work, because I think that was a blind spot, particularly for us as a community, and the African American community probably wasn't paying attention to, just based upon knowing that, the number one thing that you can own of value is your home. And so want to acknowledge you on that hard work and you and your team as well, and also give your worker, Rasheen Cruz, a little shout out for the work that he has been doing.
He's the chief. He's the chief. So, he knows everything that's going on with this operation. During the pandemic, when they shut it down, he's the only one that he was walking to work to make sure we pick those checks up, because the mail never stops. And he has shown a lot of leadership in our office, and thank you for the acknowledgement.
You're welcome. So a couple questions regarding, and this was some along my line of questioning the other day regarding making sure that we're working on diversity and inclusion as it relates to contract opportunities, procurement opportunities, and I'm glad that at least you were probably one of the few, amongst the few departments that has at least close to, as you mentioned the other day, 90 to 100% as it relates to utilizing people of color firms to do business here in the city of Philadelphia. So one, kudos for that, because we want to use it as a model. Two, just want to get an idea about the process. And so how do you go about recruiting and soliciting opportunities for people of color to do business with the Register of Wills office? Is it a bid process or direct services contract? And then the second part of it is in terms of you revamping the vision for your office as you move forward. What are some of your key plans and strategies from a community standpoint and also from an engagement standpoint as you take the office to the next level?
Excellent question. Thank you. For the record, Councilman Swiller, can I read my introduction? Because I didn't actually introduce my office, and I would like to read my statement. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. And we'll get to you, Councilman Johnson. So good morning, President Clark and members of City Council. I'm Tracy Gordon, Register of Wills and Orphans Court Clerk. Joining me today are Emilio Di Gregoria. He's my Deputy of Government Affairs, and Errol Dika. He's my Finance Director. I'm pleased to provide testimony on Register of Wills Fiscal Year 2022 operating budget. The Fiscal 22 budget general fund request for Register of Wills is a little over $4.1 million. The funding will continue to support the Register's vision to educate the public about tangled titles that for far too long have created racial inequity throughout the city of Philadelphia. With little else change, this budget represents the amount needed to maintain current staffing levels and provide funding for the successful operation and initiatives of the office. This past year has been difficult due to the pandemic. Despite that, the Registrar of Wills office stayed open during the entire pandemic, and this was before my 100 years in office. So I had to start this process from the ground, from out my house and out my staff house. With these funds in fiscal 22, the Registrar of Wills plans to do the following. There will be an initiation of the electronic citation delivery service. While most courts was closed down, my court was open via virtual. We were able to marry people, close to 500 people during the pandemic, virtually by way of a Quaker marriage. And we were the only ones in the city of Philadelphia and pretty much the country that was marrying people during the pandemic. As well as we continue to allow people to come to open estates and probate. And this is all within 3 weeks of the shutdown and within 100 days of my taking oath for this office. So I had a vision that, smacked us in the face with one of the most, the worst pandemic in this century. Yet my staff came out every day. And with the public property, if it wasn't for them, we would not have been able to put the product out that we put out. Public property came, and when all our windows was broken out during the riots, every last one of them, they had to clean it and order windows, and it just was a mess. And then we had to outfit the office to make sure all my staff was safe. Public property came out and put shields in front of everybody's desk. They measured all our space. Everybody was within 6 feet, so we can let people come in on appointment basis only. And so with the initiation of that electronic citation delivery system, it's going to save us millions of dollars, and lawyers that they don't have to come from out of town for us to hear the case. It's going to save time. And so that's one of the things that we are going to continue to initiate, and we found that it's a proven success and is a model for the state of Pennsylvania. We're also going to initiate a web payment service. When I came here, we didn't have one, and we're in the process of seeing how we could. That's going to bring us a lot more money than the normal little under $7 million that we normally bring in. Despite the pandemic, we have brought in way more than what we spent. And we continue to send millions of dollars every month to the state of Pennsylvania, normally to a tune of $80 to $100 million a year goes to the state and the state taxes from Philadelphia. So we're doing our part as a county. And then I was told that we were the only county in the state of Pennsylvania that is current on their payments to Harrisburg. So that's hats off to my inheritance department and my mailroom, my chief, and everybody else. The next thing, we're going to implement a probate fee deferment system. And this is a program that Councilwoman Sherelle Parker was giving us accolades about, because it's really a game changer in the city of Philadelphia if we can get even a small percentage of those tangled titles reversed and put into the homeowner's name. And then that's going to save us a lot of money, and it's also going to send more money to the state of Harrisburg. We're already sending the 80 to 100 million a year. If we get these tangled titles and get these people to own, that's more money, that's more revenue for our city. And I want to stabilize the Registrar of Wills historic archives. And when I say historic, I mean we have archives that date back to the 1600s in the form of documents that are still in paper form. And during the time of the riots, they broke out every window on the first floor and came very close to those archives that I'm telling you that are not preserved. The Molotov cocktail went into Starbucks and burnt it down to a matchbox. Had that Molotov cocktail, and it's on video, went in any of those rooms on the first floor, we would be in really a bad state, because we would have totally lost. We need to digitize. We need to pay attention to our archives. That is proof of history. And it's really a travesty. I would like every one of you all to make an appointment so we can come down and you can come see for yourselves, council people or council members, how in bad state that the archives are in. And so those are some of the initiatives for the record that I wanted to let the city council people know as far as the initiatives that I have been able to do during these challenging times. And for your question, we'll defer that to my chief deputy, Emilio DeGregorio, can give you those details. Councilman Johnson.
Good morning, Emilio. How you doing?
Hey, good morning, Councilman Kenyatta Johnson. For the contracts, we utilize the City of Philadelphia's contract policy and competitive bid system and PHL contracts.
Thank you, Emilio. And so, in terms of moving forward, and I want to get an idea, particularly about the deferment process for probate, and I guess that'll be for Madam Register of Wills. But I just wanted to get clarity. Now, what in terms of the FOP, and I was kind of taken back by doing the last hearing, just getting an idea of the lawsuit that they have against your office, because it wasn't a lawsuit prior to you becoming the Register of Will, and any issue around the union. So give me an idea. Well, one, who's the firm that's fighting the FOP, and what's the FOP grounds on their lawsuit perspective when it comes to your particular office?
Emilio, you can respond to that.
Sure. Councilman, the law firm was Littler Mendelson, who was representing the Register of Wills on behalf of the city for the FOP, against the FOP. And I believe there's been a little misconception about how the FOP represents the Register of Wills. This goes back to the 1980s of a law order that was set out forth by a judge who included the Register of Wills non-exempt employees part of the FOP bargaining agreement. They are non-paying FOP members. So I think initially when the change of administration, some employees felt the need to, exercise their rights of being represented by the FOP. But as far as that's concerned, the recent decision in the lawsuit was in favor of the Register of Wills. It has since been taken on appeal, and the law department has taken over representation in that matter.
Okay, and well, I'm pretty. In the event, and what's their basis? Their basis is that their claim is that they are the rightful representatives of the workers of the Register of Wills. And your challenge is that no, that's not the case.
I think our position has been that the FOP has always represented the Register of Wills employees at the bargaining table. But as far as union rights and work rights of union representation, similar to the police and sheriff's office, it's a little different. There's a gray area there, and I think case law would better speak to why we are just represented in bargaining and not in every other matter regarding the FOP contract.
Okay, all right, thank you. And one last question. When it comes to bargaining, who would that bargaining be with?
It would be with the administration.
The administration, okay.
Yes.
All right, okay. All right, thank you very much. And I will follow up with Madam Register and their team just in regards to the probate deferment program, because I think that's going to go a long way into helping individuals get them deeds inside their actual name. A lot of times the holdup is the money, the taxes that have to be paid to actually put the deed in your name. And if you don't have the money to come up with it, then a lot of times it's like, well, I'm not going to pay that. I don't have it. Then I'll let it sit dormant. Okay. Well, listen, thank you, Register of Wills. Thank you, Emilio, as well. And I appreciate the work that you're doing, and have a good one.
And also, Councilman, I want to let you know this. The real problem is they don't know the information.
Yes.
So if you don't know the information, you know they're sitting in these houses believing they own it until the chimney collapses or the heater goes out, and then they come to your office and they say, "Hey, they're programmed to help me get these, repairs for my quality of life." They find out then. We are not teaching people, particularly I want to talk to the legislator about teaching them about the role of the Register of Wills. People need to know. People are not making wills. So you look at how many potential tangle titles there are. In this pandemic alone, all those people died. Those people own things. And a lot of them did not leave wills. And so that makes it, more difficult for a family to navigate. And so that's why, we need the additional funds so we can get the communication, because everybody is not on Facebook or on social media that's where I've been able to dominate and educate people. We have to get mailers out. We have to get the information out to everybody. So thank you for that question.
Yeah.
And I look forward to working with your office.
I want to say, I want to commend you because you have definitely taken the office to the next level in terms of, you did it during the pandemic, community outreach, doing the town halls, right? And that's a key part of informing individuals about what the Register of Wills office is all about, because probably the typical person doesn't know. And so those types of door-to-door, block by block, town hall by town hall approaches goes a long way in making sure people are informed. And I'll wrap up on this. Yep, it's critically important because you're talking about someone's actual home. And I know in my neighborhood, most houses are transferred down from one generation to the next generation. But when the taxes go up, the first question we ask is the deed in your name, right? And then a lot of them say, no, it's not. And there's a variety of different hurdles. Obviously that transfer tax is one. And then two, just not knowing, just figuring I'm going to be okay.
They don't know
about paying my taxes. And so
they don't know until it's too late sometimes. They don't know, because if they don't know and they die, then that's another estate they have to be open. It's layers of this. It's not just this is in my mother's name at the age of 65. What are you going to do about it? Because you have 5 kids that all going to have stake in this. And then that's when it gets very muddy. And that's the urgency that we have to take and on making sure that everybody knows what's going on. And my staff had to teach me that in like a matter of weeks, and then I had to make sure that they were safe too. So we've done a lot of work over there on behalf of the city of Philadelphia, and thank you all for your support.
Thank you, Madam Register. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council Member. We'll next go to Council Member Jones, then followed by Dom, Jim, Thomas, and then Gilmore Richardson before we start the second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Madam Register, I'm going to continue with you. I am pleased to see your progress. You've come a very long way from those days where we did transition meetings and talked about some of the obstacles. And I want to thank my colleagues for highlighting some of those successes. What I want to ask you while I have you here is, have you dealt with the state reimbursement? We send a lot of money to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are contributing to their coffers, yet when it comes to them reciprocating and sending some supplies and furniture, you had to borrow furniture from public property.
We did. All our furniture is used and borrowed.
So have we straightened that out at all?
We are working with the property, the department with Bridget and them. We actually have went over some blueprints on redesigning our office. And so we just recently needed an update because what happened was COVID hit. And so as far as the $80 to $100 million that we send on an annual basis during, non-pandemic times.
So wait a minute. Hold it. Madam Register, say that again for the public.
Okay, yeah. I like to say that. $80
To the
$100 million in estate taxes, inheritance tax, goes to Harrisburg from the county of Philadelphia. 67 counties. Philadelphia ranks number 1 and 2 in the most money sent is us in Montgomery County.
So the notion that Philadelphia just takes from the Commonwealth is just a myth.
A notion.
And we give up, for every dollar we send, we get maybe 70 cents back. And so what you're doing is feeding their coffers without a lot of return. But I just wanted to put that on the record. So how have you transitioned physical space? You guys were dealing with not only the pandemic, but you were dealing with people walking in off of the streets.
Yes.
Without much protection. How have you made improvements physically?
We work with property and security, and now you can't just walk in the city hall. You have to have an appointment. You can't walk in our section over there down 180. And of course, it's always been that way to get to the marriage department. But to our direct access to us, now you have to make an appointment, which we believe we're going to continue because it's more professional and it's been more efficient. And then, if people pop up, we've been able to fit some of the lawyers in, but yes. And the bathroom that was open for public, it is only for when the jury comes, and the jury comes once a day for a couple hours, and they have to go through the electric meter. So we have totally eliminated that. As far as our front staff, we built offices in the back that has them out of the direct traffic, and the office and the front desk at the probate is fortified now. We found some used furniture. You should have said these guys, Rasheen, Emilio. I had them. I'm like, I need this stuff out of here, and they really transformed. If you come down to the office, you wouldn't believe the things that property helped us do. And so we still have used furniture, but at least it wasn't a broken furniture that people was injuring their back. So it was a risk management situation as well.
So when we see Rasheen on the fourth floor, we lock the doors and count our chairs. He's trying to borrow something.
Yo, Rasheen found a lot of furniture. Thank you all. Yes. Yeah, he did.
So real quick, I liked also the fact that you are working on the city of Philadelphia's archives. We've got deeds that go back to the founding of this city. Mm-hmm. Where are you on your project to create a museum space for that kind of important documents?
We need money.
Okay, but tell me.
We need money, but we're in the planning stages of it. We have an exploratory committee going on right now. We're in the process of creating a budget for exploratory committee. We are consulting with people, and we are internally. That's one of the things, projects that Rasheen is working on, is looking at the Smithsonian and some of the museums so they can assist us in finding a budget for it. The main thing is, whatever we do with the archives, we have to go to the Pennsylvania Archive Society. We have to get the approval in legislation. We have to get their approval to do anything to document. So we are at the
tell the public some of those documents that you found that were in disrepair.
Yeah, they so a lot of the marriage records, they're in old binders and with the old paper, and they're crumbling. They're crumbling. We need to get those digitized. We have some of the founding fathers and some historical figures like Princess Grace will, John Rittenhouse will. We have Frank Sinatra's marriage certificate when he married Ava Gardner. We have so many archives and artifacts that can go into a museum and tell a story. And it could be, some of our archives is definitely older than some that's sitting in the Smithsonian, because this was one of the first colonies. And we have this in paper form in the basement of City Hall. And I think it's the 9th floor. And then, of course, we have a whole storage room down on Spring Garden that you all need to come and see. And this is all paper. We need to digitize it. The Amish came in, during my predecessor, they allowed them to come in and they did a certain, Amelia can go into debt. They digitized a certain amount of our archives because, they have those genealogy, I think, what's that famous genealogy? That is, Emilio, help me with that project. Tell the councilman how we got those digitized, those archives.
Sure. How you doing, Councilman Jones? Good. Some time ago, the Mormon Society provided professional equipment and staff to digitize a certain block of years for our office. The cost of doing these high resolution pictures is enormous, and it's tedious as well. I believe it was for like 1919 to 1926. And after they took those images, they provided us a copy of those images for our database. That's just a fraction of what we have to do. We're currently, as Madam Register spoke, we're in conversations with OIT on developing a digitization process, scanning images, transponding the images, because a lot of the old written wills are hard to,
So,
information from.
This is more than just museum visits. This is a matter of record that can determine title, that can determine who owns properties in the city of Philadelphia.
Yep.
So this is essential record keeping.
Yep.
So I just want to put that out there on the record that what
it's very serious
preserves not only the city's and William Penn's legacy going forward, but neighborhood legacy. Like Grandma married Grandpa back in and gave the deed too. So that is the one way most urban people create wealth.
Yep.
It's real estate. And so keep on doing what you're doing, Matt.
I just found out my grandmother, I thought she was born in Florida, and I looked up her marriage certificate, not my great-grandmother, and it was in North Carolina. It's on there because it asks you where you're born. This is genealogy. You can come and actually, it's public knowledge. We have a little nominal fee, and you could actually come up and get your family's marriage records. And even if they ever probated an estate, you can come back and see what you all owned and see, how it probated. All those documents are available, but we're in danger. And we saw that danger where had that Molotov cocktail went inside of City Hall.
I remember getting a text from you.
I know.
Yeah. I don't know what you wanted me to do. To come down and go.
No, I just said get somebody out there in front of City Hall. That's what I was telling them. I called Daryl. I was ecstatic. I was like, please get some cops down there at City Hall. They tearing up down there, and our archives is in my office. We, as a result of that, we had to shut down. Property had to shut us down for like 2 months. Glass was everywhere. It was in. Some of our workers had just left moments before that happened.
So between you and Member Richardson, I just because I'm chair of public safety doesn't mean I'm going out there and garden buildings. But
yes,
thank you so much for your service to the city of Philadelphia. If I could, Mr. Chair, a real brief question for the Commissioner of Public Property.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you. Bridget, are you there?
I am. Hello.
How are you again?
I'm good, thanks.
In relationship to our buildings, some are older than others. And when we start talking about safety and ventilation, do you rank the buildings our staff are in?
We do not rank them by comparison. What we do is we put the highest level of filtration that we can for the systems as they're designed. So each each building has a different design ventilation system, right? So what we do is we look at that system and we put in the highest. So you'll see like there's more airflow in City Hall. There's more airflow in the MSB. They're all different. They don't rank. You don't rank them by that.
Ventilation in City Hall?
Mm-hmm.
That's news to me.
Yep.
All right. And so as they rank them, so you don't rank them that it's safer in MSB than it is in CJC.
No, that's not the way we do it. Is you completely look at how a system is set up. So they're designed for each building very specifically. So what you do is look at the ventilation needs and requirements in that system. You can't just put additional ventilation and say we'll just say the CJC without going by the design of the HVAC system of the CJC, or you'll mess up the system. So each one it stands on its own like merits, more or less.
So we are systematically upgrading the filters?
Yes, the filters they're changed more often. They're at the highest MERV level they can be, which means they take out the most particles they can. That's in all of our buildings, yes.
So are we doing that for our neighborhood buildings such as fire, recreation? What about recreation?
I can't speak for recreation, but I can speak for police and fire. That's all been done. It's been done constantly, you know what I mean, throughout the pandemic. Obviously they were occupied, right? The police and fire stations, they were occupied. The fleet sites, we are occupied. The L&I sites have been occupied. City Hall has been, our 4 main buildings have been open. They haven't been open as much as they've been in the past, but they've been open. So yeah, we've handled all that stuff.
Are you looking at libraries?
No, we're not. Libraries isn't in our purview.
All right. So whose purview is it in?
The library.
Oh, they're independent.
Yeah.
And
so health does their own. Health does their own. Library does its own. Parks and Rec does its own. And we do police and fire, the 4 main, the quadplex, and we do some fleet and some L&I offices.
So do we have Commissioner Otlevel?
I don't think she's on this. I don't think she got a call back. But I mean, we work, I will say this, I don't want to put words in what they're doing's mouth, but we work very closely with facilities from Parks and Rec and Library, and we're all pretty much doing the same thing to keep everything running.
So could you provide to the chair a status of those buildings as well? I'm in police, fire, but also libraries and rec centers, because that's where the public goes. And we want to make sure they're okay as well.
Sure, I'll get that info from them. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council Member. And next we'll go with Council Member Dom. Then we have Jim Thomas Gilmore Richardson. And second round.
Thank you, Chairman Squilla. Good morning. And I guess my questions are for Commissioner Greenwald, if she's available.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
I have a few quick questions, and they're surrounding like the office market, I guess, which I know you're familiar with. I know that we have our own space of buildings that we own and we have people in. I also know that we have office buildings that we lease from, landlords. Any idea on annual rent payments that we pay as a city to third parties on an annual basis?
So I do have the rent info in front of me. Hold on one second. Give me one sec. Let me pull it out so I don't give you the wrong info. We pay approximately, hold on a sec. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I brought a really small copy. So hold on. Let me look at it. Give me one sec. It's about $25 million a year in rent.
Okay. And I know that I know we've had a lot of conversations, and you've been doing a lot of work during the pandemic on trying to figure out how we can save the city some money on our leases. And I know you've engaged a third party. And I wonder if you could share with us, because I remember seeing analyses that could be anywhere from $7, $10, $15 million of savings. Where does that stand right now, and how can we maximize those savings, especially considering what's going on in the office market and this whole situation that's going on in the world with people not coming back to offices and condensing and the hoteling concept? So maybe you could share that with us.
Sure. So we're at 10.2 million right now in rent savings. That's with the big 3, as I call them, the big office buildings that we really don't have any intention in the future of getting out of. They'll be reconfigured, but not out of. And that is 1234 Market, 1101 Market, and 1327 and 29 Chestnut, where the DA is. So actually, this Friday is the Public Property Committee meeting, and all three of those lease savings and negotiation and expansions are going to be on that committee meeting on Friday. So that's what we found out. But we did engage a third-party broker to do the analysis for us, to do the reaching out, to do the negotiations with the landlords. That's where we stood. As for touchdown space and things of that nature, we have some leases that are coming up that are not part of the big three. That what we're hoping to do is take those leases and consolidate the units and the divisions and the departments that are in those spaces and filter them into either more owned space or some of these bigger leases that we have. So what's going to be key is getting those return to work action plans from each of the departments to see how they anticipate their departments are coming back, right? So anyone that's doing a hybrid, we can produce some touchdown space. Anyone that's saying, hey, majority of staff are not going to be coming back in the office, definitely touchdown space. So that's just a matter of gathering all that information, doing an analysis of it, and see what our buildings are going to look like going forward. But yeah, we've been, and I've been working with your office a lot. We've been on constant calls with BOMA and International Facilities Management groups and BizNow and all, just trying to keep up with the trends and see what's going on. And it seems like in the beginning of the pandemic, it was like nobody's ever coming back to work, right? Ever. But now it's creeping up. People are realizing we need a vital, downtown. We need people do need that interaction. So it's starting to creep up a little bit, which is nice to see when you're downtown.
So, and as a bottom line number, what could you share with us as council that you think we'll be able to save annually on our office leases going forward?
I don't want to put a guess on a number right now. I want to see if it's the two buildings that I'm considering that I think we can get out of those leases. They would be those two. I can definitely share them after I get these plans. I just don't want to put a number out there and then we, if we can't do it. But there are two major leases that I think that are coming up in 22 and 23 that we can have some savings. So that will be in addition to the money that we're saving right now on, some tenant improvement money, some work letter money, and free rent.
So I'm not trying to pin you down, but I am to a degree. And I'm trying to figure out what is the number, or conclusive number, that you've been able to save us in your department through this last 12 months through the consultant and all the other things you're doing.
That will be the 10.2 that you'll see in the 5-year plan savings. That will be that number. Anything after that, like what we can consolidate next fiscal year, will be in addition to that. So that's the number. I don't want to actually say specifically because I don't know it yet.
And because there's a lot of potential money here of savings, are there any tools that you need that we could help you with to help us achieve those savings?
I feel working through the third party's been great because they have a lot of those tools right at their disposal where we don't really have them. So that's been great. They have all that, they can analyze the market and give us all that information like at their fingertips. So if we continue to use the third parties, I think that's really helpful to us. I really do. I think, and they can actually give us good advice too, real estate advice going forward. So they're also involved in a lot of these conversations where they're saying, what is the marketplace going to look like in downtowns in general, not just in Philly.
Okay, well, thank you. I do think as we climb out of this pandemic, that the office market is one of the markets that is most affected by what has occurred. I actually think that the retail market might expand quicker than it will take for the office market. I think we're going to see contraction in the office market with office buildings probably converting to residential in some cases because there won't be enough demand. So that lack of demand gives us the benefit of taking advantage of the rates and so forth. So keep up the good work and keep saving us money, please. All right,
thank you. I'll try.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Gim, Thomas, then Richardson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank all the departments who are on here for your tremendous work. We really appreciate it. And Bridget, thank you for being so accommodating and supportive of our office. And to Commissioner DiPetrio, thanks for responding to all of our alarming concerns. We, again, really appreciate the engagement. My set of questions, however, are for Commissioner Carney. And is she available?
Yes, I am.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Thank you for providing the additional testimony that you had earlier. You know, I want to follow up regarding the ongoing concerns about safety, access to court-ordered out-of-cell time, and the current lack of adequate staffing and high levels of absenteeism. You know, we have been engaged with you on this issue, and I want to open these questions by saying that I think that this issue is not just about you. So I hope that we can start by being there. This is a city concern. It should demand the city's attention, and you should get help for it because it feels very urgent. At the last meeting, you mentioned that you currently have 330 vacancies total, 260 of which are uniform vacancies. I think it's, important to note that you have consistently said that the prison population has not been declining. In fact, we've seen an increase since, the initial numbers went down and then it went back up again, and it's hovering around 4,800 inmates. And of course, one of the very deepest concerns that we've got is the high level of employee call-outs, reaching extremely high levels in recent weeks, for example, at CFCF, which forces the prisons to occasionally go into lockdown. And, we have a federal order on us where we could be charged $10,000 a day if we don't meet federal guidelines for bringing inmates out of their cells for 3 hours a day. And all of this is to say that I just want to, take a moment and acknowledge that this is a serious crisis. And I know that you are bearing the leadership of this, that you have to figure some of this out. And what I want to say on this call is that, again, I don't want you to feel like you're alone, and that these inquiries and questions are not about questions about, that would challenge your responsibility and your leadership. I think it just means that there are multiple players that are involved here, which include the courts, the district attorney, the Defenders Association, advocates, the federal courts, and yourself, in addition to the mayor's administration. But 6 people in the prisons have been killed and assaulted. 3 of them, I believe it's Mr. Hinkle, Mr. Fasson, and and Dale Kirby were all killed were all housed on the exact same cell block at CFCF. On a daily basis, the lack of adequate staffing is creating situations where prisoners are being denied their right to out-of-cell time and sometimes are being held in their cells for days in some cases. So this is a crisis. And while I appreciate that some efforts are underway, such as, we know that you're bringing in 3 additional classes of corrections officers, you're increasing shift differentials, I'm worried that our current efforts will be insufficient. In order for us to do one of 2 things in this current situation, either increase staffing very quickly or reduce the population of inmates very quickly. I know you feel this, but, Mr. Hinkle's death and Frankie Diaz Jr.'s death were both for drug possession. They had minimal amounts of bail. They were housed with, you understand, I think, what we're saying, and some of it is to put it on the record. But my question is, how many months do you expect it will take until you will be appropriately staffed for uniform officers in order to meet both the demands of the federal ruling and the clear safety needs that are being requested of you by both advocates and by your own staff?
Thank you for those questions and comments, Councilwoman Gim. As for increased population, we will not be able to see a decrease until we receive support from our criminal justice partners, which are the First Judicial District, the District Attorney's Office, and Defender's Office. Over 90% of our population is pretrial, so people are just sitting here waiting for their cases to be heard. The FJD is conducting an evaluation of all listed common pleas and municipal court cases, including the evaluation of continuances. And there have been far too many. I have raised this issue, and the preliminary report is that the continuance, 68% have been requested by the district attorney's office, 18% by the defender's office, and 10% by the court. So far too many. But FJD is taking that evaluation. As part of our efforts to increase the number of cases being heard, in partnership with municipal court, we stood up a courtroom at the detention center back in March. Unfortunately, a decrease in the number of cases have been heard. We've discussed this with the courts as well, and the public defender's office and the district attorney's office. These cases must be heard. The initial goal had been projected to be about 60 to 65 cases heard per day. After the initial implementation, we were averaging about 30 plus cases per day. Now we're averaging only 11 cases per day. And so this was in our efforts. We know the only way to get out of this is while we're onboarding staff is we have to move these cases in order to decrease the population. We have no control over that, but we need the district attorney's office, the defender, and the private bar to pursue aggressively getting hearings scheduled so that matters can be heard and people aren't unnecessarily remaining incarcerated while they await disposition of their case. It's very unfortunate. We're 14 months into this. We've been at the forefront from the very beginning. But we are apparently just shouldering the sole responsibility because we house the individuals. But we're going to need all of the partners at the table. We won't see our population decrease until there's a galvanized effort to have the cases heard. In the meantime, we are deploying and assigning the staff to manage the population, and specifically regarding the contempt charge for $10,000 a day. The court found grounds to hold the city in contempt because it's not an issue, and it won't issue a final decision until after June 10th, 2021. Between now and June 10th, 2021, we will need to show the city that we are in compliance with the court's order for the prison population to receive at least 3 hours of out-of-cell time per day. On June 10th, the scheduled hearing the city will provide a briefing on our efforts. At the hearing, the city must show by clear and convincing evidence that we are in compliance with the order on out-of-cell time. If we fail, the city will impose a fine of $50,000 and order daily fines in the amount of $10,000, which will double every 2 weeks until the city's in compliance. In order to meet these out of cell time, and we are doing all that we can to encourage this. But from the onset, this was the perfect storm. The pandemic hit. We experienced a high attrition rate, and it happened all at the same time. So we have received approval to hire, and we'll continue to do continuous hiring of cadet classes, and that will be ongoing. We just finished a small class in early May. Our classes have been much smaller than in previous years because people are transitioning out of the field of corrections. It's been a challenge, not just here in Philadelphia, but around the country. So we're working tirelessly to do engagement, recruitment. We currently have our job announcement out for correctional officers. It started from the 17th. It will run to the 28th. We're going to expedite identifying those applicants so we can start their background checks for those who apply. We have a small cohort remaining of an active civil service list. We are currently vetting those folks to onboard them, and if they accept a position, we anticipate that we would begin onboarding them in the coming early weeks of June. With this continuous hiring, our Training academy time is 2.5 weeks. We will do all that we can. We'll have continuous onboarding of classes. Historically, it's been targeted 3 per year. We're going to do a continuous hiring in multiple classes and bring people in to the facilities. One of the challenges, and I've stated this on multiple testimonies, is we continue to work with the members, the staff, the union, to encourage that cohort of folks that are still employed by the city of Philadelphia to report to work so that we can afford the individuals out of cell time, and that is our goal.
For clarity, could you tell me how large is a typical cohort? Like 20 some, right?
So we're averaging between 25 and 30 per class. Prior to about 3 or 4 years ago, when we were onboarding classes, our number was 50.
Okay, and you do about 3 classes a year.
Yes, when we were hiring, when the population necessitated, we were hiring those 3 classes. Because attrition hit at once. I mean, this was not a situation where we were not planning. The population was going down. We were in the process of depopulating another facility. Then the pandemic hit and it brought it to a halt. So we're going to have to do the continuous hiring, and we're going to take as many people in those classes as we can at a time and make sure it's continuous to get more people in the facilities.
Right. My concern, though, is that with only 3 classes a year of 30 classes, you are talking about 3 years with no attrition, right? With no additional attrition before you would be able to be fully staffed. And is there a reason why we're not doing more than 3 classes a year?
That was the original testimony where we said 3 classes a year. Because now we've applied and received approval for continuous hiring, we're going to hire up to our vacancy level. So it's not restricted to the 3 classes per year. This will be continuous hiring as we fill these slots.
Okay, so you are not, I mean, the goal, so I guess the question is, how many months do you think you will take until you hope to be fully staffed for uniformed officers?
It may take 6 to 9 months projected, but the continuous housing, which is very different from how we onboarded previously, where we waited for specific periods of time. This is continuous onboarding.
Okay. That's helpful. I definitely appreciate the numbers that you gave us regarding the requesting for continuances from the different departments. Chairman Jones from Public Safety and myself will be coordinating, one of those larger meetings to discuss this and make sure that we get those actors together, because I think, as you can see, Chairman Jones, we're 6 to 9 months until you've got full staffing. We could reduce the number of inmates by 60 cases a day. In 10 days, it could go down by 600, with 90% of inmates being pre-trial, especially given, the horrible things that happened to Christopher Hinkle, Mr. Fasson, Frankie the all the the 5 of the inmates were being inside of their cells. This needs to be a priority. Last question is what, you asked this a bit. There was, you're dealing with significant vacancies and such a significant drop off. And, it's complicated. But, the concerns about the jobs of our correction officers, these are the workers, is challenging on a regular basis. But, so many complaints is that the work environment is toxic right now. It feels like people ding for things when we need to really bring people back. What progress have you made on reducing the number of staff costs in recent weeks?
I made tremendous strides with that, where we wanted to do that. One of the things, the misconception is that, first of holding staff accountable. We know corrections is a very important and challenging job. It's in the public safety role, and we need staff to report to work. We are hiring folks, and I just want to give and commend the staff. It's not the full complement of staff. We have men and women who are reporting to work every day. I've said it once, I'll say it again. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be operating as efficiently as we are. So I have to acknowledge them. But there are a cohort of individuals where we're not just dinging people for policy violations. It's basically for not coming to work. We need to hold people accountable. People are compensated to perform this work. And these are people who have exhausted every single type of leave you can imagine that we've offered under the city's time that's been afforded, the CARES Act, the COVID-19 Act, the Advanced Leave Act. Listen, we know this is challenging, but we have a responsibility to report and show up. We are no different from police and fire. And I think when you're holding people accountable, it does not feel good. And so when you have someone that's exhausted, accrued leave, FML, personal leave of absence, CARE Act, advanced leave, that's our only course. And it is not to punish and be punitive, but it's to give the employee the opportunity to self-correct. There is no industry that would allow that level of vacancy without being addressed properly. The more people we have inside the facilities is what we want. But it's an ownership. It's a stake. It's not one individual that's responsible for morale. It's all of us. For the staff that are coming to report to work as scheduled, I've heard from them time and time again. Commissioner, thank you for what you're standing up. I do appreciate having a partner, but it's going to take all of us. But police, fire, and prisons, we're all public safety. The same responsibility for staff to report. We need to do that. We can't just have people not showing up and not having it be addressed. But for the people who are showing up, I have to commend them. They are doing a tremendous job.
Absolutely. And I heard the bell ring, and I'm going to wait for my second round of questions. I did just want to make ultra clear. I absolutely am not talking about holding people accountable for not showing up to work. I am saying, however, that the massive number of staff callouts and the massive attrition that we're facing has a lot to do with staff members feeling unsafe at work. And so, that's the thing that we want to address. We want to be partners with you on doing that immediately. You heard a commitment from us that we are seeking to reduce the number of pretrial inmates who do not need to be in prison and who can, if they can afford to post bail, then we need to do that. But I think the issue is that the staff call-outs are related to safety and to a feeling of that the rest of the city is looking out for them, recognizes that they are our city team, they are our city workers. And like you said, Commissioner, we absolutely commend them for showing up to work every day and for doing the heroic work of doing important public safety efforts and caring for people as they await their trials. But they are very clearly saying it's not safe for them and we need to figure something out. And so my second round of questions will continue in that vein. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we'll go to Councilmember Thomas and then Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to start by just saying thank you to everybody for being on the call and all the work that everyone is doing for the citizens of Philadelphia. I'll just keep with Commissioner Carney. Just briefly, Commissioner Carney, based on listening to the dialogue of the testimony thus far, it sounds like 6 to 9 months since you can staff up. Is there any support that can be provided in the meantime? I'm wondering, and excuse my ignorance, but I'm wondering if we can maybe call on some of our state partners or anyone else. It's clearly a lot going on. The likelihood of another incident taking place, I guess, is high now. Is there anything that can be done between now and that 6 to 9 month time period to provide support and to assure safety measures? And if it's not, I completely understand. I'm just curious.
So we're exploring working with our other counties and the state. We have an agreement with the state for our state sentenced inmates. We are working with the sheriff's department to have those inmates transported to the DOC reception facility, so that will decrease the population for the state inmates that are currently still housed here.
So, Commissioner, I guess I'm asking, can anyone be brought in? And that's really just yes or no. Is that a thing?
Not at this time. Not at this time. We're not looking to bring any external partners in, but we're looking to see how efficient and we can expedite the onboarding of new staff, but not at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to move on to L&I now. Clearly, even in today's conversation, but in general, there's a lot of dialogue as it relates to a lot of the illegal construction that's taking place in the city, significant concern around illegal stop and goes. I even had a situation where I tried to report a stop and go myself based on personal experience, and there was no investigation that took place. And then there's this underground economy dealing with after-hours spots, specifically with nightlife. And when we look at the gun violence in the city, one of the things that we're not talking about is how after-hours spot and different illegal locations that operate in the middle of the night are feeding to the gun violence in the city. So I'm wondering, from the perspective of L&I, if anyone is here, can someone talk to me about how L&I regulates nightlife on top of these other hurdles that they're dealing with on a consistent basis?
Good morning, council member. Yes, so in essence, there's a couple different things happening there. With regard to the nightlife, we have a nuisance property unit that works on those. Their sole mission is to handle those sorts of nuisance properties, speakeasy, illegal nightclubs. It's not exactly underground economy per se. That's sort of come to be known as something slightly different. But our nuisance property unit, their primary duties to sort of manage that sort of stuff, and they work in conjunction with police and liquor control enforcement, because typically these kinds of things are multifaceted. Now, they're out there after hours. They work every weekend. They have throughout the pandemic, as all L&I inspectors have. But it's a difficult. We've certainly seen an increase in the numbers of these sorts of spaces, and I think this is twofold. One, folks were just frustrated in trying to get out and do something. Two, I think there's been an increase of vacant spaces, because we're finding a lot of these in spaces that are absolutely not intended for an assembly event. You know, typically like restaurants would sometimes convert into a nightclub. There's zoning implications and safety implications there, of course. But we're seeing these in like a corner store and formerly vacant spaces. So it's a bit of a challenge to sort of address these. Now, the nuisance group does a great job in terms of getting out to these, but how many
people are involved in this nuisance group or nuisance department? Like, how many staff members are we talking about?
So the nuisance property unit is actually there's 5 full-time employees, but the inspectors come from our larger code enforcement group. So
we have 5 people who are responsible for ensuring that regulations are being abided by as it relates to the nighttime economy?
No, 5 people staff the unit. They're full-time staff members. The inspectors come from the larger code enforcement group.
So how many inspectors are we talking about for nighttime?
So they typically will go out in teams of 2, and they're on a rotating basis. So right now, I believe there's 10 inspectors assigned to it.
So we have 5 groups. So basically, there are 5 groups of inspectors that are responsible for ensuring that night activity and night regulations are being abided by the city of Philadelphia.
Strictly speaking to nuisance activities, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to go on the record again and support some of the things that my colleagues talked about earlier. Councilmember Heenan consistently talks about some of the illegal construction in the city. We are clearly understaffed when it relates to that. Councilmember Bass has been a strong advocate around the illegal stop and goes. Clearly, we're struggling as it relates to that. And I want to go ahead and add to the record that we're also struggling in a city of 1.5 million, a huge city like this, to only have 5 groups of people. And God forbid if something happens to one of the groups and we're down to 4, who's responsible for regulating these activities. So, Commissioner, this is no, this is no knock to you and your department at all. I think this is our level of advocacy that's saying that we need more dollars and more staff into this department, as well as into the Commerce Department. One of the things that I've been pushing for is a nightlife economy manager to be able to regulate some of these issues that we're talking about, that you're seeing an increase of as it relates to illegal locations, but also to find a way to streamline this industry so it becomes something that can possibly be a tourist attraction, but most importantly, can help the economic viability. So thank you for that information. I just wanted to put that on the record. Before my time is up, I want to go to the Register of Wills office, and I wanted to ask a couple questions there. Madam Register, you testified earlier that we had a significant number of people die last year from coronavirus who did not have a will. Our city records show that over 3,600 people died from COVID in 2020, which we all know is unfortunate. It's heartbreaking. I'm pretty sure almost everybody at this point knows a Philadelphian who unfortunately lost their life to this pandemic last year. I'm wondering, out of those folks who passed away, how many of them actually did not have a will?
I don't have those statistics on me, but I can get those statistics to you. What time period do you want? Well, we'll do it from the time of the state of the emergency was called currently, and we'll get it over to you. I don't have that number off the top of our head.
Okay, I was listening to your testimony earlier, and you said that there were a lot of Philadelphians who died from coronavirus who did not have a will. So I was wondering what that number was, because, I think that if that number is a number that's significant and we're looking at, I guess you could say, a significant number of new Tangle title issues that have presented themselves, I think that we should find a way to be able to address that issue.
And one of the ways that we can address the issue is to educate the public, because they don't know that when they die without a will, that if they have assets, they're leading their estate down to a Tangle title. It's automatic. It has to come. And if they don't know to come, many of them don't even know about our office, much less know to come to us. They don't know what the Register of Wills does. That is the problem, Isaiah.
I agree.
They don't know what our office does. And so what I was saying as far as that's not just the pandemic. That's every year. That's why I have to do so many citation here. And we can track how many wills came in. And we don't know medically how they died. But statistically, we'll be able to tell you, through the people that died during the pandemic, who came in with a will and who had to require a citation, which
so my
meant
time
they
is up.
didn't have a will.
Yep, my time is up. So what I'll do is I'll hold the rest of my questions for my second go around, because I do have a few more questions for a few more departments. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Isaiah.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilmore, and then we'll start the second round. We have Heenan, Ginn, and Thomas.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I wanted to start with the Register of Wills and with our Madam Register of Wills, Tracy Gordon. And then I have questions also for the Department of Public Property and L&I. But Madam Register Gordon, I just wanted to thank you immensely for the work that you have been doing since you've become our Register of Wills. I think the work around the Probate Deferment Initiative program and everything that you're working on to educate the public through all the forums you've been having online, of which I participated in a few, will really pay huge dividends to a number of Philadelphians who were really suffering in silence, and for those who were just uneducated about the process, particularly around tangled titles and deeds. What I wanted to do was start first by thanking a few folks in your office, including you, Madam Register of Wills, and Lou Dorenzo, Colleen. Thank you so much, Colleen, Keith Harris, Tamika Jefferson, Bernice Bradley, John Zimmerman, all your deputy solicitors that have been on the program with us. If I didn't mention your name, it's not because you are not important and that I don't thank you, but those are some of the folks that we've been working with very, very closely over the last few months, even for our senior initiative across the city. We've been sharing the information about the Probate Deferment Initiative, so I wanted to start there. I wanted to thank you. I wanted to follow up on some of the information we received back from one of our departments as a result of one of our earlier hearings, wherein they notated the composition, the racial and demographic composition of the Tangle Title and Deed Advisory Committee, of which we found is 86% white. So what I wanted to do, and I want to put on the record, I've already talked to Ann about this, and I'm going to be working closely with Ann Fadulin's office and Melissa on some of these Tangle Title issues. But I wanted to ask you, Madam Register, if you have any demographic information on the individuals that you all have assisted thus far for the probate deferment initiative.
Yeah, we have. I can get that data over to you. Right now, because we're in the beginning stages, they're in the inquiry stages. So we will send you the report over to everyone that responded for requests for information as it regards to the PDI program, and we'll get you that racial data as well.
Excellent, excellent. I also wanted to thank our Majority Leader, Councilmember Parker, for the work that she's doing around the direction of some of the mortgage funds that we anticipate will come to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and thus to the City of Philadelphia. And I think there's an opportunity there to help individuals who may be living in a home with a Tangle Title or deed that may have a mortgage on it. So that's another way for us to provide mortgage assistance to individuals who are in precarious positions. So I also wanted to put that on the record. Now I'll circle to the Department of Public Property. I have one very quick question for the Department of Public Property.
Hello.
Hi, Commissioner. It's
How
so
are
good to see you. I've been seeing you throughout the pandemic at City Hall. We always see each other when we're going in and out of City Hall.
We seem to have the same timing, don't we?
We do. It's every time I come to City Hall. So I just wanted to thank you for your work throughout the entire pandemic and put on the record to your team who helped us move in as quickly as they could with our Sergeant at Arms at the beginning of the pandemic. I wanted to thank you for that. And also memorialize our friend and former coworker, someone who I consider one of my closest friends and allies in city government, Raheem Stoner, who I still miss greatly. It was just the anniversary of his passing, so I wanted to memorialize his life today. In that vein, I wanted to ask about the work that the Department of Public Property is doing around the recruitment for trades and, from trade schools and CTE schools in the city of Philadelphia, and how you are creating opportunities for recruitment and for jobs from school district students, particularly those who are in CTE programs, to sort of help us fill the pipeline on those skilled trade positions that have been hard for us to fill over the past few years.
So we've started this program. We have some stops and starts, right? With this program. So we have about three students that came from Edison that are working with us now full time. So that's been great. So they're coming in at the trainee level. They're coming in high school. They're working with some of our seasoned trades workers and supervisors. They're learning certain trades. They're coming in as more generic building maintenance mechanics. And then as they move forward, with what they're learning and whatnot, we're letting them decide like which field do you think is more, suitable for you. So we've had one go into HVAC. Two are still undecided. We're still planning on recruiting now that schools are opening back up. You know what I mean? We're planning on still utilizing that program at Edison. We did try something with Ordinance Tech. That's where we had a little bit of fits and starts there. So we have to revisit that and how we were bringing people in. But it's been slower, but it's starting to pick up some steam. So.
Sure. And then in that vein, I know that I requested and we received back this information from Stephanie Tipton's office around anticipated vacancies across city government over the next few years. What anticipated vacancies will you have for the Department of Public Property that specifically could be an opportunity for us to provide a workforce development program or pipeline or pathway for students in the school district?
a lot of them are these trades worker positions that I'm talking about. Coming in as a general building maintenance mechanic is wonderful for us, right? Because then we can show you the different aspects of the different trades, and you can, some people don't want to be an electrician, but they want to be a brick mason, or they want to be a painter, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So you try to match the person up for their skills, and then obviously they'll be happier, we'll be happier, and it'll go, continue with a great relationship. So we have a number of our employees, we have a more seasoned staff in public property. So a number of them are in the drop program. They will be going out. We do utilize where we try to really make drop work where you have the 4 years. We try to bring people in, not all 4 years, but within the last year or so, and get them up to speed for when these people go out. It has been challenging. The pandemic's been really challenging because there just haven't been like the students to be bringing in, but we're getting there. So we have a list. We work with our HR department really closely on how do we recruit. We come up with new ideas all the time. Our staff is great on saying, hey, why don't you go to this school? Why don't you do this? I know a kid that can do this. Why don't we figure out this way? So I imagine that will be the best place for us for workforce development, would be with the trades workers. I know we have also worked with OHR and bringing in some management trainee level. And a lot of those kids come from the local colleges and things like that to actually go into some of the more administrative type roles.
Sure. So we'll definitely follow up with that. We have our follow-up meeting with OHR already, but we're trying to go department by department to see what workforce development activity is proposed in your budget, whether it will manifest itself in Class 100 with change in specifications for some of the Class 100 positions, or if it manifests itself in Class 200 where you're setting aside specific dollars to help with the recruitment of the young people and or creating that actual pathway or pipeline. So we'll definitely follow up because skills trade helpers was one of the positions that came up most often in our conversations with the administration. So I just wanted to get that on the record as we move through the budget process. I did hear the bell, so I will come back on the second round with my questions for the Department of Licenses and Inspections, particularly around the implementation and enforcement of the drug paraphernalia bill. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. We'll jump into the second round. I know we have Councilman Heenan, Gim, Thomas, and then Member Richardson. Councilmember Heenan.
Thank you, Chairman. And I have a lot to discuss, so I'll try to be succinct and specific. As you know, Mr. Precho, Commissioner, that I've always been a champion of providing more staff. All right, so L&I can have all the tools to do their job and to fulfill its responsibility. All right, that's clearly defined in our codes and activities for patrol and construction activities, and ensure that all projects are permitted and safely and following the safety precautions. Meaning, that we have people to enforce the law that we have on the books, and I've never asked you or the department for anything other than enforcement to enforce the law that we have on the books. So is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I want to clear that for the record and stay for the record. So what I have is a little bit confusing. So we talk about staffing in the organization charts, and I had mentioned it in the first budget when you were up, in 2019, 22 operating budget, we have code enforcement officers off enforcement as 153, 158 filled positions, permitting, and this is in 22, permitting 95 and 103 filled. And then, you go back to 19 and it has 170 that is budgeted, 157 filled, 99 budgeted, and 84 filled with license and permitting. And then in our hearing recently for the 2022, you broke that down a little bit more and said we only have 50 field inspections for code enforcement, and we only have 52 field inspectors for permitting and license. And even, you know, my colleague, Council Member Thomas had talked about, you know, you had mentioned, you know, the speakeasies and or the nuisance patrols that we have with the department are coming out of the field operations. So we have all these other bills or policies that you're supposed to enforce in addition to not getting to the part of the construction economy where people aren't pulling permits, they're not paying taxes, they do not have licenses. In result, we're losing approximately $25 million a year. That's $250 million over 10 years. I mean, Council President has robust programs, you know, with $250 million trying to serve people who need services the most when it comes to affordable housing, when it comes to rent, when it comes to other service to help lift people out of poverty. And we're leaving $250 million on the table over 10 years. All right. Councilman Thomas mentioned the nuisance the nuisance issues, right? And you said 5. That's 5 people coming from field impaired. Then that's 5 teams of 2. I don't think. I thought you said 5 people who were paired up. So that may be like, you know, 2 teams of 2 that's covering the entire city with somebody in rotation, not including Councilmember Gilmore's you know, great legislation on our commercial quarters with the drug paraphernalia. So how are we going to keep up with all the additional enforcement and policies that we have when we're not being able to cover the ground and enforcing the laws that we have on the book?
Thank you, Councilmember. So let me, if I wasn't clear, I apologize. There's 5 full-time NPU staff members.
Ralph, just state your name again.
Inspection.
Ralph, just state your name before you start your testimony. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Ralph DePietro, Acting Commissioner, Department of Licenses and Inspections. So we had 5 full-time staff members of our nuisance property unit, but the inspection complement comes from the code enforcement. The 40, it's currently 47 now, inspectors. So there's the 10 work in pairs of 2. So there's 5 teams that rotate the week duty, typically Friday and Saturday, but they're also out there sometimes during the weekend on Sundays.
Okay. So let me ask you, hiring, even pre-pandemic, we couldn't fill the positions for inspectors, right? Both in property and in our building and codes. So I worked with former Commissioner Perry. I worked with the administration. I worked with Dr. Generals, and I worked with Philly Works to help with coming up with a program with our community college that everybody's on board with to hire with success, training people who reflect the look and feel and the culture of the city of Philadelphia in cohorts of 20, just 20 per year, 20 and 22, 20 and 23, and so forth, 5 years out. All right, working with community college to help train our inspectors and set them up for success and to make with a job opportunity with the city of Philadelphia. Would you still be willing, all right, to implement a program like that with all the buy-in of with the mayor's pillars of in his mission of pillars and this council's policies that we look through, especially when we've been looking through everything, starting with the equity lens?
Yes, absolutely. I think, in fact, perhaps it's a good point to just give a little update on that effort. And I really do appreciate what you and Council President Clark have done to sort of connect us with community college. We've actually had those meetings. Right now, the intent is to develop a curriculum. As you may well know, our success rate was bringing in new employees and getting them through the certification process was not as high as we'd like. And that was just a certification process. This project with the community college is actually something very new and something very different, which will allow us to not only train them in the certifications, which are required to do the job, but also in a lot of those other skills that they need to have. The skills, there's sort of like dealing with the public and how to document results. And there's a whole litany of sort of almost like a social worker type skills that a really good inspector needs to have, whether they're in construction or code enforcement. So that process is ongoing. I think that's going to be a real game changer, both in terms of the department, both in terms of our public interaction and certainly in terms of our diversity, where the code enforcement side, diversity is sort of well established. It's been the construction side where it's been difficult, and that's no one's fault. It's just the hiring process. We tend to hire tradespeople, which tend to be sort of older fellas that look like me. And so I think that the community college program, I think, is really going to go a long way to sort of opening that up. And I'm really hopeful that this is something we're shooting for the fall term. Again, this is still a process that has to be underway, but I think it's more than virtually anything we're doing, other than our technology upgrades. I think this is probably one of the most important things that the department will work on in the coming months.
But Ralph, I worked, I brought this to the attention 3 years ago. It wasn't just this year. It was 3 years ago with a thought out plan and solution. I hope we're able to execute such I think an accomplished plan and make sure that it happens. How long does it take to train somebody and an inspector? I know you have two types of training. One is 18 months and one is about a month. How many trainees do you have and how many dropped out? And for the record, I want to let everybody know, we pay people to train while they're working on the job. And then when they quit, all right, we lose about $100,000 if they per trainee as they go. So it's really important, all right, to set people up for success, not failure.
Yeah. So there's the training program is about 18 months till full performance on the construction side, and it's about 6 months to full performance on the code enforcement side. And during that time, they do a mix of classroom training. We have various vendors that come in and do classroom training, and they do field training, which is really done by our other inspectors who are really in the best position to sort of teach what it means to do that job. So the truth of it is now we don't have any trainees currently. They've all been promoted to full performance. It's our intention to hire, of course, as part of this community college program. We do intend to hire some of the inspectors, both for our audits and investigations unit, our construction group, and some code enforcement inspectors. So we'll be doing some hiring in the coming months, and there was money in the proposed budget to actually increase our audits and investigation unit, which again is going to be money really well spent in terms of helping the department to sort of handle some of the many obligations it has. So
what happened to the hiring list that we had, and that has been ongoing for like 3 years? People were notified that they were going to go through the process. I mean, is there still a list? Or, I mean, what about people who were looking for job opportunities that never had the chance?
Yeah. So we had, for example, like the building inspector list expired the end of the last year, I believe it was. So now one of the changes in order to make the community college thing work is we had to change the job title. So the construction inspector job title traditionally would only permit folks to apply if they had like a complete, sort of trades background, carpenter, plumber, electrician, that sort of thing. We had to change that to allow folks to come in with a degree, for example, construction management or something like that. So that change just went through, and that list is underway now. So what we'll do is that's the list we'll hire from, and those lists are only good for 2 years. They expire. We've had situations where we've exhausted lists, and we've had situations like last year where we basically had to stop all our hiring and training because mostly we didn't have the ability to train with the inspectors, the actual field training, which is important and critical because you certainly couldn't put inspectors together in a vehicle if we're trying to observe the social distancing, sort of with the physical distancing requirements. So for the past year, we've really done none of that. So in the coming year, we'll hire from this new list construction and code enforcement. In fact, the interview process will be, it's probably just a few weeks away, at least the beginning of the interview process.
In addition, and I'll yield to the second round, in addition to the the plan that we worked on, the program that we worked on together with Philly Works, L&I and Dr. Generals over at CCP, was 20, cohort of 20 for 5 years. So that's 100 over 5 years. All right. And additionally, I'm asking the mayor's office, all right, for 25 additional inspectors, however you see fit, for 2 years. So that would be 50 inspectors on for upfront for 2 years, and while continuing to have that 20 cohort. And I think that is fair. I think that is reasonable, and I think that will help capture a lot of revenue. All right, what is your revenue? All right, your operating budget's around 28 million, and you generate over 70 every year.
That's correct. 28 million.
Okay.
That includes the demo fund.
All right, so I mean, listen, everybody. All right, what are we missing? We're missing millions and millions of dollars every year. All right, because of the good work that the inspectors do, if they can get it, if they're not overworked with 700-800 permits that they have per individual. All right, that's why we're trying to work with them. They need more help. They generate revenue. They keep people safe. They help stop preventing buildings from collapsing and homes collapsing. That's why we're doing all these new policies. So I will yield to the second round. I just wanted to make sure I got that out. And Commissioner, thank you for your time. And Chairman, thank you for your courtesy.
Thank you, council member. Next, we're going to go with Gim, Thomas, and then Richardson. In that order, Councilmember Gim, you available?
Yes, thank you so much. And I just wanted to continue the line of questions with Commissioner Carney. So one of the questions that we had is a little bit about something that you and I had discussed regarding Mr. Hinkle, which was what the department's policy is about housing inmates with vastly different charges maybe against them, so that Mr. Hinkle, who's in on a drug possession, is housed with an inmate that has a violent, history and had concerns. Has the prison system changed its policy on how they are housing inmates together to ensure that those who are nonviolent, or in on nonviolent charges are not housed with those that are in on assault or other charges?
Okay. So there are many factors for how inmates are housed in intake, which go beyond their charges only. We use an intricate classification system according to a national model, which was the result of guidance from the National Institute of Corrections. There are a number of risk assessments formulas that to do that. It is unfortunate regarding Mr. Hinkle. We've responded to the extent that we can so that we do not impede the investigation, and sharing any additional information prior to the conclusion could potentially compromise the case.
Yes.
But we have responded. But we do have a classification, nationally recognized model that we do utilize. And we understand the grief of the family, of Mr. Hinkle's family, but we want to make sure we don't compromise any evidence. And we want to make sure those involved are being held accountable.
Absolutely. And I don't expect you to speak to the specifics of the case. I'm asking if the department is reviewing any changes to its policy to ensure that there is a better match, because 5 inmates were beaten to death inside of their cells. And so, what we want to ensure is that despite whatever metrics or formulas that are being used, they obviously need to be improved, reviewed, and or changed. And so how is the department working to review those policies, ensure that inmates are housed together appropriately?
When we are reviewing our policies, these are nationally recognized instruments that we're using. And in light of these recent incidents, the kind of behavioral health screenings that we do to protect inmates from attacks like this is not 100%. We still deal with human beings that may exhibit or not exhibit such behaviors. Each inmate receives a behavioral health screening at intake within the 4 hours of admission. From the time of admission, staff at intake are trained to immediately escort those inmates to behavioral health that are displaying significant behavioral symptoms such as hearing voices or statements of violence or self-injury. Again, these are self-reported or observable, or if someone is presenting this way. Further, our inmate tracking system has a flash that alerts the staff of a new admission who was diagnosed as seriously mentally ill or previous admission that had this SMI flash. We can pay attention to them. These cases have happened during the first week of intake. And so if we have no prior knowledge of an individual's behaviors, mental health diagnosis, or treatment prior to coming in, we have to assess and observe and look for self-monitoring. But we do have protocols in place. This is unfortunate. We take every death seriously, but we do have systems and nationally recognized tools in place that we're utilizing to identify and prohibit such attacks and assaults of this and resulting in deaths from this happening. But I just wanted to respond accordingly.
It sounds like my time is up. Is that right, Mr. Chair? Do I have to come back on the third round?
You could ask one more, and then
Okay.
we'll come back.
You. Okay. We've gotten reports, and I'll end here, but we've gotten reports from family members who have their families in PDP facilities about grievances that have been filed about unsafe conditions, inadequate access to medical care, and other issues that go unanswered. What is the process for reviewing and responding to grievances? What is your goal for the timeline? What do you typically hold as a responsible response time in responding to a filed grievance? And we will be asking the department to provide City Council with a list of grievances made by people in PDP facilities this year as well. So, and then I'll stop after this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So inmates can submit a grievance in the inmate grievance box. That grievance box is checked daily by the facility staff. The staff then respond to such grievances. There's an investigation period to determine the findings of the grievance. At that point, individuals receive a written response, and then the grievance is either closed or for further investigation. Any grievance that is submitted is required to have a written response back, but the grievances are collected daily. And as far as medical care or treatment, inmates have access to care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are receiving timely medical care. Any reports that we have received from family members and up to my office, we respond back to the extent possible without violating HIPAA rules. We speak with the individual who's incarcerated as well to acknowledge your family has reached in, and we confirm whether or not the individual did receive treatment. And just most recently, I received an email from a grandmother who stated that her grandson did not receive care. I called her. She was very surprised that I returned her call. I responded. The individual had been seen. I had him scheduled for another follow-up, and that case was resolved. And one of the things that we're asking for is specifics. We're getting inundated with a broad array of, my loved one is not receiving care. We always ask, provide the name and the PP number of the individual so we can investigate and look into every single case. When we, in certain cases, about 40% of those inquiries that we had received, when we asked for inmate name and PP number, we didn't receive a response back. So we want to make sure that we're being diligent in our response. And if anyone is making a claim we're ensuring that medical health continues to be provided.
Thank you very much, Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Councilmember Thomas Richardson, and then back to Councilmember Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be quick. I know we're running a little late. So very quick, I just want to get a couple questions on the record for the Register of Wills, and then I will be done. So 3 quick questions real quick. The first question is, and also I'm going to echo my colleague, Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson, when she talked about the staff over at the Register of Wills office who've been extremely helpful with a lot of constituent issues that we have faced. One of those issues were marriage licenses. I know that you talked about the office working throughout the pandemic, but we did get a lot of concerns around marriage license and the difficulty to get marriage license. So that will be one question, and talk a little bit about that. Another concern that was communicated to my office was city employees being laid off during the pandemic. And we all know as a collective, we've tried to keep folks to work. So that question could be answered as well. My third question is going to be around the contracts. We've been talking to all offices, departments, independent electeds about their top contracts. I know in our Appropriations Committee hearing, it was communicated that all the contracts through the Register of Wills office are Black-led firms. But I think one of the firms that were communicated today is actually not a Black-led firm. We also had dialogue in the Appropriations Committee hearing around the $137,000 transfer ordinance. And in that hearing, there was some testimony that was communicated that was related to unpaid debt. So I was hoping that there could be some elaboration on that as well, too. And then after that, Mr. Chair, I will definitely be done. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Hopefully Emilio jotted all those questions down. Emilio, you can respond to these questions, please.
Sure.
And then
sure.
Errol can respond to the other stuff.
At the time of the last week's testimony, I was unaware of the Littler Mendelsohn firm. I was under the impression that the attorney who was handling the case, who was a minority, was a member of the board of that firm, but it turned out to be not the case. So my apologies for that information. That was incorrect. But as the Register stated, everything outside of the legal case that was brought against the Register of Wills, the firms are minority, as she stated. The unpaid debt for the contracts that we requested the additional $137,000. These were contracts that were engaged prior to the pandemic, and on the onset of the pandemic, we went back to our vendors, tried to work out agreements with them. We felt that during these unprecedented times, some flexibility was needed, and the majority of our vendors agreed. We were able to negotiate lower fees for services that were provided. We suspended those contracts as well. So once we close out these contracts and pay them in full, those contracts are no longer in effect. We tried to be as fiscally stringent as possible due to the circumstances.
So just to be clear, now the testimony from the office is that these debts are not paid. So I get what you're saying as far as the minority contracts. If we can get over to our office, those providers and those contracts, that'll be great. We love the fact that you're focusing on minority businesses. We think that's excellent. We've been pushing that on council. So now, if I'm clear, the $137,000 transfer ordinance request is for debt that's not paid. It's commitments, but it's debt that's not paid. So these providers have not been giving their proper compensation, and all of these contracts, as far as the debt that you're asking to pay, were contracts that were signed prior to this administration. Did I get that correct?
I think
Amelia, I can take it.
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, council members. My name is Errol Dika. I am the finance director. So we have worked with the budget office. There was an expenditure transfer that was processed by OBPP. Another department lent us some money up front to pay some of the debt currently, but the majority of the invoices have been carried over from the previous fiscal year.
So can you, I mean, we're speaking broad, can you tell us what percentage of those contracts were carried over and what percentage of the contracts are new money? Because again, this is something that we're emphasizing as far as local businesses, minority businesses, and things of that nature. And my colleagues and I have to take what I'm calling a very controversial vote in the next couple of days as it relates to this transfer ordinance. And I've already voted against it for several reasons. And I think that it's important that we get as much information and as many details as possible as it relates to that. The bell rung, so my time is up. If we can just get the answer to the other two questions on the record, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, so there's a set of invoices. There's a combination of two from FY20 to FY21. So the FY20 invoices that were paid with the FY21 funding at the beginning of the fiscal year. And then we worked with the budget office to get some additional funding to pay the FY21 pending invoices. So we are in the final stages to clear all the pending obligations. So I have like about $60,000 to $70,000. I don't have those numbers in front of me actually, but that were paid for FY20, and then another pending that was about 145. But as Emilio stated, we have negotiated down the prices with the vendors based on the scope of services and the job that was done.
So if approved, and $137,000 transfer ordinance is granted, then at that point, all outstanding debt will be paid to all contractors and all vendors. Is that your testimony today?
Correct.
Thank you. Can we get the answer to the other two questions on the record so I can move on, because I don't want to hog my colleagues' time?
What were they again? You said them so fast, I didn't get a chance to write them down.
I apologize. So the other questions were around complaints that we received from constituents as it relates to employees being laid off during the pandemic, which was a priority for the city to try not to do that to the best of our ability, as well as the issue with the marriage license. Again, I know that the department and the team worked really hard, but we did get a lot of requests around marriage licenses during the pandemic. So if we can just get an explanation for those two things on the record, that would definitely be appreciated.
I'm not sure about the marriage license complaints. I haven't received any at my desk. During the time of the pandemic, we exclusively stated that we were only marrying constituents that one of the partners had to live in Philadelphia, because we were the only people, the only office in the county that were marrying people, and in the country marrying people. People were calling us from outside of the city. So in order to protect my staff from overexposure during the pandemic, we had certain criteria. It had to be emergency. One of the partners had to be an essential worker, and definitely one of them had to be a citizen of Philadelphia. And so I made that executive decision to protect my staff so they wouldn't catch COVID and have overexposure from people from the outside, and two, to also protect my staff from an excessive amount of bombardment of people trying to get married because the other counties didn't open up, or because the other states didn't have the privilege of having a law called the Quaker Law.
So, Madam Registrar, it was reported that just because I want to make sure that it's clear, it was reported that over 3,000 requests to the office for marriage license were not responded to. So I just don't want to make it seem like that this is me, making up numbers or anything like that. So
okay, for the record, I need to see that record because I haven't seen it.
No problem. So I just want to make sure. Again, this is no knock to you or the office.
First of all, where'd you get the number from? Was it intake from your staff? Because we like to see that data. Because that's actually I haven't seen that data.
Madam Chair, what we'll ask is that Councilmember Thomas have put those questions in writing. We'll submit them to your office. If you could provide them to the council president, the chair, that would be sufficient.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then my last question around layoffs, and then I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Emilio, you can take that question, please. Thank you. Thanks, Councilman.
For the question of layoffs, I would have to refer to our deputy of HR, who is not on this call. I can get that information over to you with the information for the other questions as well.
Thank you, Emilio.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Next, we'll have Councilmember Richardson, then we'll go to Councilmember Heenan.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. For this second round, I simply had questions for licenses and inspections. And again, just wanted to start off by thanking Commissioner DePietro for all of your work and really for always working with Beth Strainberry in my office on all of the constituent cases that we have. You're always very, very responsive. And to Sarah Adamo, thank you. I also wanted to say that I think it was perfect timing for Eclipse. It could not have been better timing before the pandemic to get that up and running. And I finally had my first experience with Eclipse, and the program worked very, very well. So I wanted to put that on the record. For the drug paraphernalia bill, Commissioner, and you know we've had conversations about this, and it's really in line with the questions from my colleagues, Councilmember Heenan and Councilmember Thomas, when they talk about not only the underground economy that is pervasive here in the city of Philadelphia with our inability to truly get a handle on it because of the amount of inspectors, but also around the drug paraphernalia bill that we recently passed. And I just wanted to get this on the record as we move further along in this budget process around the code enforcement inspectors and the staff who will be principally responsible for visiting these stores and doing the necessary research in advance around the stores that are violating the code and selling drug paraphernalia without going through the appropriate process on the front end. So could you just talk to us about your proposed budget, how many of these positions are budgeted in Class 100 for the code enforcement inspectors, specifically for those who will be doing enforcement around the drug paraphernalia bill and the pervasive issues we've seen across the city around these stores just popping up. And, you know, it's really multiplied during the pandemic. I mean, we have just seen such a proliferation of these stores across communities. It's no discrimination. It's not just in one particular area. It's everywhere. We heard from community organizations from the Northeast all the way down to South Philly, East Side of Broad, over to West Philly and Winfield and everywhere in between. So can you talk about the budgeted positions that you have to do the inspections and the enforcement for this bill?
Certainly, and let me, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson, I say thank you for your kind words about the department and the folks that work here, particularly Sarah Adamo. Very proud of the work that the people do, and I'm glad to hear that other folks can sort of recognize how good they are as public servants. The proposed budget actually provides for an additional 4 code enforcement inspectors. Currently, the current numbers we're at about 47 on that code enforcement inspection side, as I mentioned earlier. So this would be 4 additional ones. Now, we also have some backfill. People have retired, resigned, been promoted. So there'll be some of those hires as well. With respect to the paraphernalia ordinance, I think this is really a good way to sort of for the department to do business going forward. We're far more effective when we do these sort of program type inspections. Deputy Commissioner Carrasquillo and Mike Troyce, they manage, Deputy Commissioner Carrasquillo is responsible for the entire building safety division, and Mike Troyce manages our code enforcement group. And one of the things that they're trying to do is pivot away from this very sort of one at a time response, which is important and necessary, but to try to do more comprehensive things. So, for example, in that list, which was really very helpful, there's a 2-part process to this. Your office sent that list. We've already done the research in terms of the zoning and the ownership. The next step is we put the inspectors out. Code enforcement inspectors will go out. Now, we may do this through our nuisance unit, but I think it probably makes more sense to do through our code enforcement. But it just depends on the sort of logistics. But we'll send those inspectors out. It'll take a couple of days because there's several addresses on that list. But that's really a smart way to utilize the department resources because it helps us do a couple things. It helps us to, A, change public behavior, because the word gets out that LMI is sort of doing this in a comprehensive way. But it also allows us to catch that sort of repeat offender sort of thing. So when we can see if there's, when we look at this in terms of a group, we can start to make connections. Hey, this person owns several businesses and they all do the same thing. that's long been a criticism of the department. It was always seen as we sort of adopt this whack-a-mole type enforcement response. And we've always done some level of large, enforcement efforts, but not enough. So this way of doing it, I think, is really sort of the future for how LNI needs to be doing business. Again, the individual complaint response is important, but we're far more effective when we can put together programs like this. And certainly, I think we'll learn from what we'll do with the list that your office has provided. I think will help us inform how we handle this in the other council districts as well.
Sure, and that's the whole point, and the reason why we collected the information in that way to submit to your department. And all of that information is coming from constituents who have contacted our office about these instances, and it's really in line with the coordinated tour we had with our district Councilmember Jones, to have a coordinated approach around some of these corridors where we see this activity really popping up. So I also want to Councilmember Jones for leading that tour and for all the work that he did around ensuring that all the departments understood collectively at the same time the challenges that we were facing. And really that's the model we want to kind of take citywide and working with each, district council member and the community organizations around some of the locations that have been reported in each specific district, because we're hearing citywide about it. And so I thought I heard something through the bell.
Yeah. Council Member Gilmore Richardson, just a question along those lines. Again, thank you for your bill, and I know that LNI is looking forward to the enforcement. I just wanted to ask the commissioner, in this enforcement process that they go, what, if anything, will they be coordinating with the state, since some of the cigarette stuff is around the state, and how can we help in that? Because as you mentioned, Council Member, this is happening in many neighborhoods, and it's really impacting because many of these stores are open 24 hours a day. So just wanted to ask, what coordination at the state, and how can we help?
Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez. I think this particular bill is really relegated to zoning matters. The requirements for the paraphernalia are placed in the zoning code. So we're approaching it from a zoning perspective. Of course, because we send inspectors, they're always going to look for safety matters. That's just something that we've trained and integrated into our normal inspection process. Now, when it comes to coordinated inspections, I think that there's some value to that, certainly. That tends to work a little bit better with like the stop and go sort of stuff. I think this is one where we need to be moving a little bit more quickly and a little bit more adeptly. And part of that is there's basically two types of group that will come out of this. There's folks that don't have the zoning to do what they're doing, and they're going to have a choice to do basically one thing, which is stop selling it or somehow obtain zoning approval to get it, which that's a variance process. And there's the other group that may have had zoning approval to do it, but never got a certificate of occupancy to engage in that work. So those are wholly LNI things. And I think there's probably some opportunity to do some joint enforcement with perhaps health, who handles mostly cigarette stuff, and maybe the state. But I think for this early phase, it's much better to get us out there and let us do something, get a handle on it early on. And then we can scale that up. It's like anything else we do at LNI. Bringing things to scale is the real challenge, and we have to be very careful to do that carefully and deliberately. And again, one of the benefits of getting these in a package, so to speak, is individual citizens can just put in complaints one at a time, and they really don't have the same effect as when we hand inspectors 20 of them. We can get much better at the enforcement. We get much better at the intricacies of it, and so it's just a smarter way to do it. And I think for now, our intention was to keep it fairly condensed, get out there, get it done, and then let's see what the results are, and then certainly scale.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want, there's some other data sets that your folks can gather as they're going, and I don't want to waste the time that they're there not to be able to see that, so we can develop the profile and the pattern. So that's all I'm asking. Excellent. We know that one thing triggers the other that triggers the other. So if you're going to do these sweeps, what are the other questions or what are the other things we should be looking at so that they gather that data, right? And then that referral can go to the health department, and then it can help us with the state enforcement piece that is more coordinated. So I appreciate it. We'll send over some notes that we think that your folks can also look at. Again, this is about data collection and then making sure we can scale up, as you said. I don't want to slow down this process because this is a huge necessity, and I know it's something that is troubling folks. So thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, Council Member, for the latitude.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Sanchez. And I wanted you to know, and that's why we're getting this on the record. When we went to the 4th Council District, it was coordinated. And Commissioner DePietro was out with us, and we had health and commerce and the managing director's office, and there were some sweeps that were done, at a later time after that, but we were all together. And that's sort of the thought process to your point around the data collection, recognizing that there are other issues typically happening along these corridors in these areas that need attention as well. So that we want to coordinate with the district council members, because you all know your district's the best, one, but also two, for the way we're collecting the information, we're getting this in from community groups and from constituents, so it's easier for us to sort of notate it by each district, which is why I wanted to get it on the record of how many code enforcement inspectors we would have for this initiative over the summer, so it helps us plan out from a planning perspective, how far we'll be able to get over the summer and into the fall, but what we need to push for in this process around what we need to see for the amount of code inspectors to actually do this work, recognizing the issue is so large. So Commissioner DePietro, I ask and humbly request that you please take that information submission from Councilmember Sanchez and utilize it as a part of the overall strategy that we are working towards for the enforcement for the bill.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you very, very much. That's the end of my questions. And thank you again for all of your help and work. One last thing I did want to get on the record is the interface of your department with the streets department. We've been getting a lot of constituent cases, and I know we had a few from several neighborhoods around construction that's happening in the city that is a detriment to the roadway or to residential streets, and it's causing a lot of issues for residents. So what's your interface with the streets department around streets that need attention or need to be resurfaced when after its construction in that particular area? Because we've been getting a lot of constituent complaints about that lately.
So typically the condition of the streets is wholly under the purview of the streets department, but what I think this might be is some of the construction excavations that are opened up. So for example, when they do a new plumbing service, they cut a hole sometimes in the street, sometimes in the sidewalk, and it stays for a very long time. I've not heard complaints about that, but that I could see where that could be a thing. I know I've certainly seen blocks where there's so many of these excavations, it almost looks like a bomb went off because there's so much construction. But I'm happy to look at if you're getting those sorts of things, if there's some type of delay. We typically will once the process, the plumber, for example, completes the work, there's a temporary patch placed over, and then the streets department comes in and does the final repair. So if there's a break in that communication, I'm happy to look at that.
So yeah, I just wanted to put that on the. I wanted to put that on the record to ask if you could, when you know there's excavations happening with the construction project, that you can sort of proactively send that to streets in between the two departments to monitor that, because that's been a major constituent concern that my office has been receiving recently. And then, we have sort of the schedule of when roads and surfaces will be resurfaced or repaved, but sometimes it turns into, bumper cars because you're going in and out on certain streets with the amount of construction happening. So I just wanted to put that on the record to ensure that you all, if there's a proactive way you could alert streets to look out for it, or just make sure that it happens after the construction parties do the resurfacing, that would be helpful, because we've gotten a number of calls about this as of late. Okay. Thank you very, very much. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. We'll have one last question, Councilmember Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank my colleagues for, talking about a lot of quality of life enforcements, right? That, you know, is true examples of why enforcement is important. So I appreciate that. And, you know, Councilmember Sanchez brought up a lot of things, and, you know, with Catherine's legislation, which most of us has co-signed in response to our community. I mean, I got 6 smoke shops, right, and candy stores. Well, I would say smoke shop. They're candy stores, right? So, you know, they're candy stores that sell, you know, illegal cigarettes, you know, loosies. Their hours of operation are, you know, either non-existent or they close when they want to close, or open 24 hours. Some of the things we do have control of is obviously working in concert with the health department, you know, for food handling and other things like that. Especially when it comes, we do have the authority with cigarettes, right? I mean, we have a density law in the city of Philadelphia, but let's not forget we have sign control. All right, and each and every one of these places, for most parts, are in violation of our sign controls, which is enforced or are enforced by L&I. So with that, Commissioner, you know, the need for more inspectors for various reasons, and these are the ones that are documented, that have permits, that are constituent completed. You know, there's a whole segment, all right, that we're not capturing. And again, I want to help. All right, we want to help you get there. And you have an incredible senior staff that work for you. They are great. They're a pleasure to work with. They're wicked smart. You know, we're gonna work towards getting more inspectors, or severely understaffed when it comes to inspectors. Can you tell me, over the past 3 years, all right, pre-pandemic, or 5 years, and you can get this to writing to the chair, all right, how many hired trainees, all right, didn't make it through the process that we were paying, and inspectors that left employment for the department? Have you had exit interviews with any of them and asked the reason why they had left, or was it the correct curriculum, like why they are leaving? And when it comes to inspectors, when we hire more, that'd be great. What is your staffing level, all right, that you think you need to help put more than 2 teams on the street for various types of nuisance properties, property maintenance, sign controls, commercial corridors, enforcements of all these policies? What is the staffing level that you need to adequately capture and enforce the law that exists on the books, and also capture, all right, the part of the economy that's leaving $250 million over 10 years on the table?
So I will certainly, I'll get that information to you with respect to the trainees that did not make probation and inspectors that have left. I can tell you we do interviews, we do exit interviews. One of the strange things is, I can tell you just from my own knowledge, inspectors tend to leave for only a few reasons. They get better offers in third-party agencies, which is something that never really happened before, at least not to the level that we're seeing now, which is actually a testament to what the city is doing in terms of inspector development. They leave sometime for retirement. You know, they get to that age. Some unfortunately leave under less than ideal circumstances, and that's a large part of our efforts to make sure that they're operating with integrity and operating with the best interest of the public at heart. So I'll get you that information. I'll get it to the council president. And regarding the right size, it's a great question, and it's one that's plagued the department for a long time, because we know full well that governing to the extent that what I do is about prioritizing, knowing what we need, where we need to put resources. I think there's some of the investment we're making in this budget in our audits and investigations unit will absolutely pay off in the long run in terms of increasing our footprint. A lot of the things that we need to do, just Councilperson Gilmore Richardson's plan, a lot of what we need to do can be done in a much more efficient way if we were to adapt a little bit to strategies like doing programs. to do more proactive stuff, corridor sweeps and things like that. So I think that that's a large part of what we need to do. Now, in terms of demand, we're finally getting, with the help of the Eclipse system in our scheduling system, we're finally getting a handle on really what the demand is for the construction inspection services. And the managers over there are now able to deploy the staffing in a way such that they can meet the demand. Meaning, if you get a permit, you'll be able to call and get an inspection within 2 days. But also start to address some of those things that you've brought up and brought up in the past, dealing with folks that are working without permits, right? And that breaks into two things: working without permits, and then working and not using licensed contractors, which is what AIU does.
Is there a general checklist for an inspector when they come out? And this was brought up with several colleagues and yourself. There's only so much a person, one individual, can handle and manage, right? I mean, there's only one thing. So is there a checklist, right, that an inspector has when they go out on a site, whether it's property maintenance, whether it's building code, or and permits? So is there a general checklist that people check and look for? Because there are laws, all right, that are on the books that just are not being enforced, all right, because I think it's just like system overload. It's impossible, all right, for one individual to, have 3-4 different code books and new policies and guidelines, making sure, that a van is properly marked, with licenses and, or their permit number and license number, and, subcontractor posting on site, or who the GC is, so our website can be updated. It's like a system overload for an individual. That's a lot of stress, man. And we want to help with that.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's certainly one of the things that we're doing. Certainly, checklists are helpful, and they're built into the Eclipse system. Different units use them. They're more specific to particular tasks. School inspections have their own checklist, whereas maybe construction inspections, the initial inspection is slightly different from a framing. So checklists are one way that we're incorporating that. But another way, and a very necessary way, is to sort of pull out those specializations and give those to folks that do that. For example, what you mentioned about contractors, it's very difficult for the construction inspector who's there to do a framing inspection to start gathering contractor information. You're exactly right. It's information overload. And frankly, it can be somewhat dangerous because it's easy to get distracted by who's on the site and miss something important, like proper fire ratings or worse, structural considerations. So we're looking at this in two ways. One, a basic line of checklists. And that's good because it also gives us a level of evenness across our operations. So everyone gets sort of treated the same. That's one way. But the other way is to sort of look at pulling those particular functions out and giving them to folks who have that expertise, like our audits and investigations unit.
Well, I got two-party questions, Mr. Chairman. Two-party questions at the end here. Audits investigation. I'm glad, that it was finally instituted. It's been around for a few years, and you're working towards a number that you feel is workable. Was there a reason pre-pandemic that the audits investigation unit was shut down? Why, and who gave that order?
So there were a couple things that happened there. They weren't necessarily shut down. They handle a lot more than just the investigation of license holders and construction projects. They also handle our annual certification processes, fire escape, bridges, which aren't really bridges, but building bridges between buildings. So they handle a bunch of other stuff, and they tended to operate consistently throughout that. One of the things we did shut down was their ability to issue stop work orders as a license mechanism. And what I think we've seen now is, and the reason for that early on was in previous iterations of it, we created a ton of confusion. It actually caused, I don't want to go back to the past, but it created tremendous confusion. We wound up with an excess of number of buildings where the work was completed without inspections and occupied without COs. It was a train wreck, and that was largely in part to the confusion between different units giving orders on construction projects. What we have now, what the unit's doing now, is really pretty stellar work. For as small as the unit is, they're doing really pretty tremendous work. And in addition to keeping up on all their annual certification stuff that they're doing, the facade ordinance, for example, is one they're working through now. They're also being able to get more and more into these investigations, and I think that's the future of some of the resources we need to put in there. Like many things, I mentioned to Council Member Sanchez, like many things, L&I needs to do these things in pieces. If we try to move too quickly, if we try to bring too many people into the process, we lose effectiveness, we lose consistency, and it leads to more and more inspector frustration. So doing these things to scale them slowly is, I know, somewhat frustrating, but it's absolutely the right approach for the department. And we can see Audits and Investigations Unit is a tremendous example of that. The stuff that they're turning out now is beyond our expectations. You know, this was an idea that, to go back to Mike Fink and Mike Maynard back in many years ago, that they dreamed of having a unit that could do this administrative stuff so that construction inspectors could do construction inspections. And so I think that's part of the focus going forward. And you're right to point out, I think they can do a lot more, and the resources that will be made available will help them to do that.
Well, I mean, to scale is a slow process, but you have to you have to have somebody, right? You have to have somebody to do it. And if it's a priority, right, there's nothing that an administration cannot do if it is a priority. And we see it all the time. And sometimes, you know, as council members, we, you know, tend to, kind of like, you know, be on opposite ends or have different opinions of things. And I'm not just talking here, but if the administration wants to get it done, they can get it done because they're the administration. So if priority enforcement and keeping our people safe and making sure that your system scales up at the proper rate, all right, and not gets, defunded or, not have anybody in it because they're, redeployed, all right, then that's not a priority. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council Member. And we do have one more question. I'm sorry. This, I promise, is it. Council Member Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner, again, thank you for all the work you've been doing. And I know that, as we go back to whatever we're going to create as a new normal, we have to change kind of how we think and try to be more proactive. To that regard, one of the things we learned during COVID is, there's a lot of people non-compliant, but we got to create pathways to compliance in a more proactive way. So, we learned that, with small businesses being able to with work with revenue to have payment plans, all of those things. Can you speak to me, what are the conversations you are having with the Commerce Department and how we're going to try to help people become more compliant on the front end as opposed to the enforcement on the back end? In your work with commercial carders and others, we found there was so much space and so much work to do here. What are some of the thoughts and discussions that are going on so that we close those loops?
Thank you. It's an excellent question. I think one of the things that we've realized there's a need to do, we need to put more information out there, both in terms of transparency for the department, because it's certainly the best disinfectant, but also to let folks know what to expect, what their rights are, what their obligations are. So one of the things that we're working on to do, in addition to sort of the technology upgrades, which will make being in compliance easier. Like, in other words, I've said this before and I'll say it again, most people do not want to break the law. They don't want to work without permits. They don't want to work without licenses. There are, of course, those that do, but most don't. And so if you make the process simple, easier for them to engage in, they'll do it. They'll do what you ask them. And in fact, if you look at our revenue, you'll see that license holders, despite in large part being shut down for the past year, they still continue to renew their licenses. And these were businesses that were facing an uncertain future at best. So getting information out there is part of that. I think the partnership with Commerce is something that we could develop a little bit more, simply because we tend to forget that because we're a regulatory agency and we have to be careful about how we do that sort of outreach, but they can. So some of that is both, some of that outreach will happen in terms of, we've talked about sort of permit wizards and ways to get information out to the public, and they've always been very, very helpful when it comes to that. And there's a lot more that we can do in that space. But I think phase one is, let's get our technology upgrades in place. Let's get our user interface improvements completed. That's the Eclipse website. And then let's also get more information out to the public about what their responsibilities are and what their obligations are. And I think there's a little bit there. You know, the streets department, the sweep officers in streets department. It's a funny thing. They're very actively taught to sort of not only take enforcement but to educate, and they're very good at it. And so I think there's a little bit to learn there in terms of explaining to people, yeah, here's what you did, here's how to comply. And I do look forward to sort of incorporating commerce into that conversation, because I think they're a lot better at outreach to the public, and especially to that we sort of learned this when we did our early level Carter sweeps. You know, early on we would tell the council person's office generally that we were going with, but we would forget to tell the commerce department. And they would be surprised by all these people calling and saying, "Hey, Ellen, I'm just here," and they wrote me a bunch of violations. So we definitely need to work with commerce a little bit more closely in terms of getting that information out. But it's also, we really do have to make it easier for folks to get licenses, to get permits, and to renew.
I agree. And I think that, again, we don't want to go back to the old normal, because we know that it wasn't equitable. And again, people, and I'm glad that you recognize that when people have a pathway to compliance, people want to generally comply. They don't want to have us visiting them. But I do think there's a space here for, we're investing in Carters, we're investing in Carter managers. And, now that we have the infrastructure on our data sets, it's like, how do we share some of the non-compliance issues with our Carter managers so they help us, right? And may mean you sending an L&I supervisor to meet with this business association or along this Carter. But I will say to you that being proactive, you're going to get people to comply easier, right? And I just think there's a space there that I don't ever want to go back to where we had a pandemic, we shut down, and we couldn't reach certain businesses, right? When we had the social unrest, we couldn't reach certain businesses. And I think we now have the ability to have systems talk to each other. And I think one of the investments I'd like to see on our Carter is, more capacity and more knowledge around Carter managers, knowing how to interface with the different departments. We're working with that with revenue. We got a lot of people on payment plans. Revenue was more generous than they've ever been, better than, when we've done some of the moratorium stuff and amnesty. So I think L&I, we have to go in the same direction, and streets department. I think we want to tell businesses, we want you back in business and we want you to be compliant, and we're going to make it easy for you to do that, right? And so there's a conversation to be had at a higher level because of technology. So I look forward to working with you on that. As you know, we have challenges. I represent 10L stops. We have Kensington and Allegheny, but despite all of that, we have, I don't want those businesses penalized for things we can't control. At the same time, I know many of them want to comply and need that pathway there. So I appreciate the work that you're all doing, and look forward to working with you through that process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. That seems to be all the questions. Is there any other last questions before we recess? Seeing none, we will now like to recess the meeting. The committee will stand in recess until 3 p.m. for the public hearing, public testimony. Thank you all. Thank you for participation. Appreciate all your time and efforts. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.